See, I think it's about that point in time where we genuinely have to discuss the top 100 greatest UFC fighters of all time. I mean, throughout MMA YouTube, I see a lot of favoritism. There's a lot of recency bias, right? And you try to mitigate those, right? You have to try to mitigate those. You got to be consistent. You got to, be fair throughout UFC history, right? You can't just look at the recent fights, right? And that's why I'm here. Fuck the 30s. Fuck the 20s. I'm doing a top 100 greatest UFC fighters of all times list. So yeah, I'm sure you guys didn't click on this video to hear me rant, hear me talk about, other people's GOAT list and why it's trash. And I'm joking. But anyways, since this is a top 100 GOAT list, right, it might be pretty long, right? So I'm gonna try my best to make this as short as possible, right? Because I'm sure you guys only came here for the list. You guys didn't come here to hear me talk, right? So I'm putting the timestamps and everything in the bottom. And yeah, without further ado, let's dive straight into the criteria. So please, guys, I beg you, please do not skip the criteria part. Please hear me out, guys. I feel like the criteria for the GOAT list is the most important thing and often is overlooked by many people. So in an attempt to come to a general consensus, here are my criteria. So please pause, the video if needed, right? Because I'm just going to give a quick overview of my criteria, right? Firstly, quality of wins, right? I'm going to measure the quality of wins of the fighters, right? Secondly, how they won/lost their fights. And thirdly, I'm not going to look at the title wins at all because simply title wins do not matter. And lastly, in order to be considered a UFC fighter, you must have one fight in the UFC. Yeah. Literally one fight. If you have one fight in the UFC, you are considered a UFC fighter, my friend. So, my logic for this is, if we're considering, Jose Aldo's WEC wins, right? Or, there was a lot of Pride fighters that, fought fucking killers before transitioning into UFC, right? Obviously, we're going to count their Pride wins as well. Right. So therefore, in order to become a UFC fighter, you must have one fight in the UFC. Then all your previous fights from previous organizations will be considered. And that's it. Now, let's talk about the honorable mention. So this is in no particular order by any means, right? I got around 20 people in my honorable mentions. Holy, 20 people in my honorable mentions. So I feel like these 20 people just didn't quite make it into the top 100. I just feel like there's 100 more people that are just slightly better than them, right? So you can literally consider this video a top 120 greatest of all time list. That's freaking crazy. But anyways, I got Jim Miller, Tim Sylvia, Calvin Gastelum, Marlon Morales, Diego Sanchez, Ryan Bader, Stefan Struve, and Dong Hyun Kim, who literally only lost to the best of the best, right? Thiago Santos, Clay Guda, Bas Rutten, Pat Miletich, Royce Gracie, Jake Shields, who literally almost made it into the list, Ken Shamrock, Roy McDonald, Gilbert Melendez, who's another one that almost made it to the list, and Renan Barão. And one more thing, there's been over 1,000 people that's ever fought in the UFC. So, I feel like I'm missing some people, right? So if, if you feel like I missed someone or someone that, that's fought in the UFC and you felt like should be included, right? Please let me know in the comment section, right? Bro, like, a top 100 list, bro, that's fucking crazy, bro. Like, this took me fucking days. But anyways, if you felt like I missed someone, please let me know. So yeah, I'm just gonna put on some Outer Ring music or some Berserk or Dark Fantasy stuff. And yeah, let's speed run the top 100 to the top 50. So yeah, sit back and relax and enjoy this video, which took me days and weeks to make. Hope you like it. Bye. 100, Tim Kennedy. 99, Sean Sherk. 98, Sean Strickland. 97, Frank Shamrock. 96, Frank Mir. 95, The Korean Zombie. 94, Brock Lesnar. 93, Donald Cerrone. 92, Carlos Condit. 91, Mark Hunt. 90, Anthony Smith. 89, Chael Sonnen. 88, Mirko Krokop. 87, Nate Diaz. 86, Matt Serra. 85, Andrei Arlovski. 84, Chad Mendes. 83, Antonio Silva. 82, Tom Aspinall. 81, Nick Diaz. 80, Gegard Mousasi. 79, Josh Barnett. 78, Sakuraba. 77, Damian Maia. 76, Chikar Souza. 75, Tony Ferguson. 74, Brandon Moreno. 73, Uriah Faber. 72, Big Nog Antonio Rodrigo. 71, Colby Covington. 70, Dricus du Plessis. 69, Rich Franklin. 68, Justin Gaethje. 67, Forrest Griffin. 66, BJ Penn. 65, Eddie Alvarez. 64, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. 63, Michael Bisping. 62, Tito Ortiz. 61, Anthony Rumble Johnson. 60, Yuri Prochazka. 59, RDA. 58, Cain Velasquez. 57, Rashad Evans. 56, Kyoji Horiguchi. 55, Benson Henderson. 54, Alexander Gustafsson. 53, Joseph Benavidez. 52, Robbie Lawler. 51, Luke Rockhold. Boys, you guys hear that? Is that thunder? Is that lightning? What is that loud noise? Holy shit, is that fucking Rampage Jackson number 50? Oh shit, what a fucking entrance. You guys see that? Sheesh, what an intro. Goddamn. But we got Quinton Jackson at 50, right? Or also known as Rampage Jackson, right? One of the greatest MMA fighters of all time. I feel like everybody would agree with this. You know, having Quinton Jackson at 50, you know, I feel like this is, you know, universally agreed. I feel like everyone agrees that, you know, Jackson belongs around this area in the ranking, right? Let's look at his wins, right? First of all, he beat Chocolate Dow the first time, right? Although that was in Pride, it was a great win as well. And then I remember Chocolate Dow transitioned to the UFC, went on a 7-fight winning streak, right? Even capturing the light heavyweight gold, right? Quinton Jackson came out there, you know, and knocked Chocolate Dow out, right? Remember, Chocolate Dow was on a 7-fight winning streak. Winning there, knocked him out to claim gold. And you know, I know he got that 2 losses against, you know, Wanderlei Silva, but he also has a win over Wanderlei Silva, and that is an impressive win. I feel like everyone would agree Wanderlei Silva is a top 50 of all time as well. And yes, I'm gonna include 2003 Kevin Randleman as Rampage's best win as well. Remember, bro, Kevin Randleman was pretty much undefeated. And no, I don't want to hear about the Bas Rutten fight, bro. I think that was a robbery. But anyways, prior to that, he only really lost to Chocolate Dow or, you know, Randy Couture, I'm pretty sure, right? And, you know, Randy Couture and Chocolate Dow by many are considered the top 50 greatest fighters of all time, right? So I'm considering Kevin Randleman as one of, you know, Rampage's best. But remember, Randleman was on a 4-fight winning streak prior to this, right? That is a good win for, you know, fucking Rampage, right? Next up, Dan Henderson. Dan Henderson is considered by many as one of the greatest fighters to have never won a bout, right? Dan Henderson is a solid win anywhere. If you have a win over Dan Henderson, that is a solid win. Yeah, he also got a win over Lyoto Machida, who is, you know, by many considered a top 50 fighter of all time as well, right? So therefore, Rampage at 50, that is a solid placement for Rampage Jackson. See, now at 49, I got TJ Dillashaw, one of the most underappreciated bantamweights of all time. You know, you can make the argument that he is one of the bantamweight goats. I mean, yeah, let's look at his record right here, right? He got Cody Garbrandt twice, right? Beat him twice in a row. At one point, Cody Garbrandt looked like he was one of the best fighters to have ever stepped foot on an octagon. And TJ Dillashaw went out there and beat him twice. And, you know, all by knockout as well. Renan Barão twice by knockout as well. You know, John Lineker, who's a good win as well. You know, Asankal, right? Although Asankal did beat him early on, right? But that was a split decision. You can make the argument that TJ Dillashaw is on a 14-fight winning streak prior to the Henry Cejudo fight. You can literally make that argument, right? Both of his losses were due to split decisions. See, overall, I feel like TJ Dillashaw has one of the best resumes in UFC history. Yeah, I'm saying it. TJ Dillashaw has one of the best resumes in UFC history. I mean, look at his loss, right? Rafael Asankal, right? You can argue that, you know, that was a win for TJ Dillashaw. It was a split decision, right? You can argue, you know, either way, right? And so he went on to avenge that loss anyways, right? Beating Asankal in the next, you know, couple of bouts, right? And then his next loss, Dominic Cruz, right? You could argue that TJ Dillashaw won that fight as well, right? So prior to those 2 fights, you can argue that he's on a 14-fight winning streak. Now, now let's just look at one of his strong losses, right? Henry Cejudo at 125. Are we really gonna count this? TJ Dillashaw, depleted as fuck at 125, right? He can literally just get hit by a win, a gust of wind, and get knocked out, bro. It wasn't even fair. And let's look at the Aljamain Sterling fight as well. Let's look at that, right? He came in there with a broken arm, right? He's already out, from the first round, right? Are we going to count that as a strong win for Aljamain Sterling and Henry Cejudo? I don't think so. So other than that, TJ Dillashaw, man, at 49, I think that is a solid spot considering, his controversial losses, right? As perfect as TJ Dillashaw's record, may seem, right? The only reason why TJ isn't ranked higher is because he doesn't have those all-time wins. Next up at 48, I got Alexandre Pantoja, one of the most underrated UFC champion in modern era. How's he not ranked top 5 in the pound for pound rankings? It doesn't make sense to me, right? I'm pretty sure he beat Moreno 3 times. And Moreno is a top 100 greatest fighter of all time. Right? People like Royval, who's not necessarily in the top 100, but the most consistent, fighter in modern history, right? If it wasn't for Moreno or Pantoja or maybe even Figgy, right? Royval would probably be the 125 UFC champion. And let's look at Manel Kape as well. People forget, man. People forget Manel Kape is a solid fighter. Not necessarily a top 5 UFC fighter, but even in Risen, right? He beat Kai Sakura, right? And we know Kai Sakura is fighting Pantoja next, right? And, that just says that there's levels to this game, right? Manel Kape is a solid, win for Pantoja. Even people like Alex Perez, who is basically a constant, top 5, a pretty consistent top 5 fighter. So yeah, I understand that 125 isn't really a popular division, right? Most of these names aren't really household names, right? But, beating Moreno 3 times, right, as well as Royval twice, should say that this guy is fucking legit and deserves to be respected. Next up at 47, I got Tyron Woodley. Arguably you can put him as the top 3, greatest welterweights of all time. Welterweight 170, bro, one of the most stacked divisions. I mean, let's look at his wins. Wonderboy twice. I get it. It's a majority decision or a draw, right? But he took one of the greatest strikers in UFC history to a decision. That says a lot about Tyron Woodley, right? Let's look at this Carlos Condit win. That's solid. That's a solid win, right? That's an all-time win. Dong Hyun Kim, not necessarily an all-time win, right? But it's a solid win regardless, right? Calvin Gastelum, who at that time was on a winning streak, right? He got names such as, Robbie Lawler, who's an all-time win as well. Damian Maia, an all-time win. And Darren Till, man. People forget. People forget about Darren Till. He was considered by many as, the next welterweight champion. Tyron Woodley went 2 bouts against Stephen One Boy Thompson and, essentially got a draw, right? Darren Till went out there and beat Stephen One Boy Thompson. So for someone like Tyron Woodley to go out there and beat the guy that defeated his hardest opponent yet, says a lot. So above Tyron Woodley, I got Alistair Overeem at 46. Holy smokes, bro. This guy has one of the most stacked resumes in UFC, matter of fact, in all of combat sport history. I mean, let's look at his win, right? We got Vitor Belfort twice, right? That has an all-time win, right? We got Verdum twice. I get it. One was a split decision, but regardless, that's a win for him as well, right? 2 Verdum wins, right? Verdum by many is considered one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, right? Mark Hunt, who is an all-time win as well. Brock Lesnar, right? All-time win as well. Frank Mir, all-time wins. JDS, all-time wins. Andrei Arlovski, all-time wins, bro. Holy smoke. He also got great wins, not necessarily all-time wins, but also great wins such as Igor Vovchanchyn, who is one of the most underrated MMA fighters of all time, right? He got Sergey Pavlovich, right? Steven Struve, right? Kharitonov. These are great wins as well for, Alistair's resume. As great as his resume may sound, the only reason why, he's ranked 46 and not higher is because of his losses. Although he has great wins, he also has a lot of losses. And that's, one of the issues that we have with, these older fighters, right? They fight a lot. They tend to have greater wins. They also have a lot of losses. And, that ultimately brings you down a lot. Next up at 45, I got Petr Yan. Right, the most controversial modern day fighter. Let's just look at the resume, right? Let's look at the clean resumes, right? he got a great all-time win in being Jose Aldo, right? That is a great all-time win. He also got another all-time win being Uriah Faber. You know, he also got other great wins, not necessarily all times, but, you know, great wins regardless, right? John Dodson, you know, Corey Sandhagen, Song Yadong, who is, you know, a solid fighter. And he won all these fights, you know, convincingly. Let's look at what brings them down, right? It's from the controversial losses, essentially, right? Let's look at this O'Malley loss. I mean, to be fair, it's aging pretty well, but, you know, at that time, a lot of people thought Petr Yan, you know, should have won that, right? But we know what O'Malley did. You know, O'Malley went out there, defended his belt twice, you know, got the belt against Aljamain Sterling, who is one of the all-time greats, similar to Petr Yan, one of the all-time greats, you know. So this loss necessarily isn't that bad for Petr Yan, right? It's not going to bring him down, you know, tenfolds, right? Next up, we got his second loss against Aljamain Sterling. Right, he lost against Aljamain Sterling by split decision. A lot of people thought Petr Yan won this one, but you know, it's aging pretty well as well. You know, it's not necessarily a entirely bad loss, right? He didn't get knocked out, he didn't get fucking curveball like he did in the Merab fight, but yeah, regardless, the reason why Petr Yan isn't higher is because of his controversial losses. But the reason why he is this high, right? Yes, this high. A lot of people have him quite lower, is because other than the Merab loss, all his other losses are pretty good losses. Alright, at 44, I got Glover Teixeira. You know, I realize this video is getting quite long, so I'm just gonna try and speedrun it a little bit. But anyways, he got all-time wins such as Rampage Jackson, who is a top 50 fighter of all time. You know, Ryan Bader, who is a great win as well. OSP in 2015. You know, OSP in 2015, that is a solid win, my friend. You know, Rashad Evan, who is a great fighter as well, one of the all-time greats. He also got wins such as, you know, Jared Cannonier. You know, we know that it's at light heavyweight, but you know, we found out how great he was when he transitioned to middleweight. We see how he beat Sean Strickland, right? He went toe-to-toe with Israel Adesanya. Striking as well, right? I get it, Izzy won, but, you know, he's still a couple rounds away from that fight. We also got all-time wins such as, you know, Jan Blachowicz, right? You know, Anthony Smith, you know, a lot of people disrespect Anthony Smith and everything, but you know, regardless, Anthony Smith is a good win. Sweet. And Nikita Krylov, that has a decent win as well. You know, Thiago Santos, who didn't quite make it into the top 100, right? Thiago Santos has an underrated resume, to be fair, but other than that, Glover Teixeira, you know, he doesn't really have that many losses on his resume, and you know, ultimately that brings him up a little bit, right? Next up at 43, I got Jan Blachowicz. You know, Jan Blachowicz, one of these people that had a slower start to the career, but you know, once they get past that, you know, mid-range point, right, they start to pick up the pace a little bit. You know, disregarding his losses in his earlier fights, right, Jan Blachowicz has an insane resume. You got names such as Jared Cannonier, who we discussed is a, you know, pretty good fighter, right? Nikita Krylov, right, who's a decent fighter as well. Luke Rockhold, who is an all-time great, right? Jakar Souza, all-time great. Dominic Reyes, after the John Jones fight. You know, a lot of people thought Dominic Reyes won that fight, right? People calling it robbery, right? And then after that fight, Jan Blachowicz went in and beat Dominic Reyes. What does that say about Jan Blachowicz, right? He also beat all-time greats such as Adesanya. You know, I get it. You know, Adesanya moved up a weight class, right? But so did Volkanovski, and people count Islam, you know, win over Volkanovski quite highly, right? So why can't we do the same for Jan Blachowicz? You know, the Rakic wins as well. And his losses are great as well. I mean, let's look at his, you know, recent losses, right? In his recent bout for the light heavyweight title, he fought Ankalaev, right? Took Ankalaev to a draw. It's a fair draw, right? He took Ankalaev to a draw, and Ankalaev is a great fighter as well. Next up, he fought Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira, one of the greatest fighters of all time. In my opinion, this was a fucking fat robbery. I thought Jan Blachowicz should have won this clear as day. Anyways, regardless, that is a solid loss. You know, it's not gonna, you know, impact his rankings whatsoever. Matter of fact, it's gonna put him up a little bit more. That Pereira loss, that's aging like fucking wine. That Ankalaev loss is aging like wine as well. At 42, I got Aljamain Sterling. And, you know, bro, fuck this dark fantasy music, bro. I'm just gonna play my own music, bro. Screw this berserk type music. I'm just... Bro, cue the Italian Gnocchi, bro. So at 42, we got Aljamain Sterling. You know, similar to Jan Blachowicz, his earlier career was kind of rough, right? He got a couple of losses, but they weren't entirely bad losses. I would say his only, you know, good losses are against Marlon Morales and Sean O'Malley, which were both by knockout. And you can't even say Sean O'Malley was really a strong loss, right? I mean, like, he was still in there. It wasn't, you know, entirely a clean knockout, right? But other than that, his other two knockouts were, you know, from split decisions, right? In which, you know, you can argue you, including myself, could have been to Aljamain Sterling. I mean, let's just look at his wins in general, right? He got Renan Barão, who is a solid fighter, right? That is not necessarily an all-time win, but is, you know, a good win regardless, right? He got Pedro Munoz, which is a good win as well. Corey Sandhagen, that's a good win. He also beat Jan twice. I know this is controversial, right? It depends on how you view it, right? If you view that, you know, Peter Jan should have won against Aljamain Sterling, then just put Peter Jan here and then replace Aljamain in Peter Jan's spot, right? But regardless, he beat Peter Jan twice. He also beat TJ Dillashaw. I get it. It was a disabled, crippled TJ Dillashaw, but, you know, that's half points for you, right? He also beat Henry Cejudo, which, you know, I thought it was a clean win for Aljamain Sterling. I don't even know why it said split decision, right? But Aljamain Sterling should have won that shit, you know, unanimous decision. You know, that Henry Cejudo, that is an all-time win. He also beat Kataya at 145, which is also a good, solid, you know, top 10 win for Aljamain Sterling. He also beat Rivera, right? That is a good win as well. So, and the only reason why Aljamain Sterling is around this area and is higher than Peter Yan is obviously because of the Peter Yan wins. And Aljamain Sterling just has a, you know, a longer fight resume, right? He also got a couple losses, right? Not many though, right? And his losses are really good losses. You can argue that 2 of them he won decisively, although the judges saw it differently. But regardless of that, you know, his losses are fairly good losses. He has really strong wins as well. You know, I can see why people think that Aljamain Sterling is one of, if not the bantamweight GOAT. Next up, this is gonna shock a lot of people, but I have Belal Muhammad at 41. Yes, I know Belal Muhammad, right? The reason why he's this high is because he, you know, barely has any losses as well. His losses are, you know, from his earlier careers, right? And then from that onwards, he gathered a big fucking massive winning streak, right? Big winning streak. And one of his losses, right, Vicente Luque, he avenged it, right? He also beat Vicente Luque later on, right? Although it is an older version of Vicente Luque, he still avenged that loss, right? Let's look at his resume, for example, right? He got Leon Edwards, who is an all-time win, one of the great all-time wins, right? Damian Maia, that is another all-time win. Wonderboy Thompson, an all-time win, right? He also got great wins as well, you know, in being Vicente Luque. Sean Brady, who is, you know, probably gonna be the next welterweight champion in a couple years, right? And he got Gilbert Burns, who is a solid contender as well, a consistent fighter to say the least, right? And the reason why he is this high as well is because of dominance, right? And we're gonna rank Khabib Nurmagomedov, you know, very highly. We're gonna put Khabib in the top 20, right? We must consider these other fighters as well, you know, especially since they're dominating their fights. You know, the same fashion that Khabib is, well, not necessarily the same fashion that Khabib is dominating, right? But regardless, a dominant, you know, win for them, right? We must rank them highly, you know, based on their dominance as well. For the case of Belal Muhammad, it seems like, you know, ever since that Jeff Neal loss, he's, you know, gathered a massive winning streak and won all his fight decisively. No controversies, you know, straight clean wins, domination. I do think Belal Muhammad has the chance to become the welterweight GOAT. I mean, he's only a couple more wins away from the welterweight GOAT. I mean, what if he goes out there and beat Usman, right? What if he beats Shavkat, right? And, you know, a couple more contenders, right? He's put that, bro, put Belal Muhammad in there. He's one of the contentions for the welterweight GOAT. So this is why I have Belal Muhammad at 41. See, next up at 40, I got Dan Henderson. One of the most underrated fighters as well, often overlooked because of his losses, right? But regardless, he has a lot of amazing all-time wins, right? Not necessarily the same amount of losses as Alistair Overeem and, you know, the type of losses that Alistair Overeem, you know, suffered, right? So this is why Dan Henderson is a little bit higher than Alistair Overeem. But regardless, Dan Henderson, let's look at his win. We got Vitor Belfort, that is an all-time win. Wanderlei Silva, an all-time win. Rich Franklin, right? Although there was a split decision, right? That's still an impressive win, right? We got Michael Bisping, all-time win as well as Fedor Emelianenko, right? Fedor is not the type of person to lose much, right? And for someone like Dan Henderson to go out there and knock Fedor out, right? That is impressive, right? People like Quinton Jackson, who is known for his, you know, strength, right? Couldn't even knock Fedor out, right? Beat Shogun Rua twice. That is an all-time win as well. Carlos Newton, that is an impressive win, right? And back in the days, he beat one of the Gracie. I think it was Renzo Gracie, right? You know, looking back at it now, you know, it was a little bit kind of overrated, right? But back then, bro, the Gracies had fucking street cred, you know what I mean? I feel like putting Dan Henderson at 40 is a respectable place considering the losses that, you know, the losses he has. But let's look at his losses though, right? Most of his losses are from people that he's already beaten. I mean, let's start from the top, right? He recently lost to Michael Bisping, which he already beat, right? Vitor Belfort, which he already beat, right? Gegard Mousasi, that you know, that is a great loss. You know, Mousasi is a great fighter, right? Although he hasn't beaten Mousasi, that is a great loss. Daniel Cormier, how can you blame that? How can you believe that? Daniel Cormier is one of the greatest fighters of all time. Vitor Belfort, right? One of his other losses, right, he already beat. Rashad Evans, who is a great fighter as well. Leona Machida, right? The point is, right, these are great fighters that he are losing to, right? Jake Shields, right? Not necessarily in the top 100. You know, looking back at it, I should have put Jake Shields in the top 100. My bad. But anyways, most of the people that he's lost to, he's either beaten already, or these motherfuckers are, you know, one of the greatest of all time. And yeah, just to give Dan Henderson a little bit more street cred, his losses against, you know, Rashad Evans, Leona Machida, right? It went to a decision, a split decision, right? So it's not even entirely a bad loss, right? So you can't even blame Dan Henderson, right? So regardless of that, Dan Henderson at 40. Next up, we got a newcomer right here. We got Ilia Topuria at 39. Ilia Topuria, yes, Ilia Topuria. I mean, he's on a fucking killing spree right now. One of the greatest, you know, back-to-back wins of all time. Right, I mean, let's just look at it, right? We got Volkanovski, who is considered by many as the top 10 greatest of all time, and he also went out there to knock out Max Holloway in this next fight. Bro, that is fucking crazy, and putting him at 39, that is really respectable. I know there's gonna be that one guy, you know, that will say, oh my god, he beat 2 of the top 10 greatest of all time, right? Why isn't he ranked top 10? But come on, man, it's like the equivalent of, you know, remember Conor McGregor when he knocked Jose Aldo out in 13 seconds, right? At that moment, right, are we gonna put Conor McGregor as the top 5 greatest of all time? Because of that knockout, are we gonna put Conor McGregor all of a sudden top 5 fighter of all time? It just doesn't even make sense, right? So, you know, putting Ilia Topuria at 39, you know, above 61 other great fighters in this list is really, really respectable. People don't realize it, but 39 is a great position for Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria has the potential to easily, you know, go on to become the top 10 greatest fighters of all time, right? He can do that easily in the next 2 or 3 fights. Right, 39 is really respectable for Ilia Topuria. Fuck it, if he goes out there and, you know, beats Islam Makhachev for the, you know, double belt status, right? Bro, I wouldn't even mind putting him in the top 10. I wouldn't mind. I mean, let's look at the wins that, you know, help him propel up to this, you know, 39 position, right? I mean, Volkanovski went out there, knocked Volkanovski out. I know Volkanovski was coming off, you know, a loss over Islam, right? But regardless, that is one of the greatest, you know, achievements that you could possibly make at the 145 division, right? Second to knocking out Max Holloway. Max Holloway has never been dropped. That's controversial, but Max Holloway has never been dropped, yet alone being knocked out, right? Ilia Topuria went out there and knocked Max Holloway out in his own weight class, 145, right? Dude, who does that? This is possibly one of the greatest back-to-back wins that I could possibly think of, right? Volkanovski and Max Holloway, 2 of the greatest fighters of all time. He also got wins over Josh Emmett, right? Who's not, you know, a top 100 fighter of all time, but Josh Emmett, that is a solid fighter. Really is a solid fighter. If I made a top 150 list, right, Josh Emmett would probably make that list, right? He also beat Bryce Mitchell, who is a, you know, constant, you know, top 10 fighter in the 145 division. Right, these are great wins as well. And, you know, let's look at his other wins. Zalal, right? We also got Ryan Hall. These wins are aging pretty well as well, right? We know Zalal is on a fucking winning streak right now. And you know, Ryan Hall, I don't know what the fuck he's doing, but, you know, that is a great win as well. Well, back in the days it was, but the point is, Ilia Topuria at 39, that is a great place for someone, you know, with little fights, right? But the quality of fights just, you know, shines. Shine bright like a diamond. Fuck, I don't Jesus. Alright, anyway. So above Ilia Topuria, I got Anthony Showtime Pettis. You know, Anthony Pettis' resume is actually low-key kind of stacked, bro. I feel like the only reason why he's, you know, this low at 38 is because of his losses, man. And it wasn't like he was old or anything, because to be fair, he was relatively quite young, right? It wasn't like he was a, you know, 40 years old, 45, you know, close to 50. No, he was quite young and he was losing some of these fights, right? But regardless of that, he does have some insane quality wins, such as the Benson Henderson wins. Who, as we established earlier, is, you know, a top 60 fighter of all time. He also got, you know, an all-time win in being Donald Cerrone, and this is a great version of Donald Cerrone as well. One of the Cerrone wins is from 2013, right? When Cerrone was a legit solid contender. We also got a good win in being Gilbert Melendez. We also got Wonderboy at 170. Remember, Wonderboy was coming off, you know, a Darren Till and Tyron Woodley loss, right? Which many people thought, you know, Wonderboy beat Tyron Woodley, right? So it was a good version of Wonderboy. He also got the Charles Oliveira win, which is aging fairly well for him. He also got a great loss in being Eddie Alvarez, right? A split decision loss in which could have been, you know, either way, to be fair, right? You know, although I had it, you know, Alvarez, right? But, you know, to be fair, yeah, it could have been either way. Regardless of that, he does have a lot of losses, like I said earlier, and that's one of the reasons why he can't be ranked any higher. So, you know, Anthony Pettis at 38, you know, I think that's pretty fair. At 37, I got Mr. Wanna Now. You wanna now. Wanderlei Silva, the axe murderer, right? I mean, prime Wanderlei Silva is probably one of the most scariest motherfuckers to have ever stepped foot in MMA. And that's a fact. I mean, no introductions needed. I feel like everybody knows Wanderlei Silva. Let's just look at his resume. His best wins are Dan Henderson, who is an all-time great. Sakuraba 3 times. 3 times. That was like the equivalent of, you know, Volkanovski beating Max Holloway back in the days, right? Not really, but like 50%. You know, I'll give like 70% of that, you know what I mean? But anyway, Sakuraba, that's an all-time win, right? He beat Rampage Jackson twice as well. That's an all-time win as well. Mirko Cro Cop, you know, I get it. It was a draw. I genuinely, truly think Wanderlei Silva should have won that fight. So I'm putting Mirko Cro Cop as one of Wanderlei Silva's greatest wins. You know, we got a young Michael Bisping as one of Wanderlei's wins as well. And Ricardo Arona, you know, a lot of people forget about him. Right, Ricardo Arona, but back in the days, man, you know, like, he was legit. He also got a split decision loss against Mark Hunt, so it's not entirely a bad loss for him, but regardless, just look at his resume, man, it's fucking stacked. The only reason why he's not any higher is because of his losses. He has plenty of losses, right? Not as much as, you know, Alistair Overeem, but, you know, later to the end of his career, right? He was winning some as well, but he's also losing a lot of fights. So those losses near the end of his career really do tarnishes his GOAT legacy. At 36, I got Vitor Belfort, Mr. TRT Belfort, right? I'm not gonna count, you know, steroid news as part of the criteria in this GOAT list. I should have made that clear early on, but I'm not gonna count that because it's just unfair for everyone else, right? So Vitor Belfort, you know, let's just look at his resume. Dan Henderson twice, that's an all-time win. Wanderlei Silva, all-time win. Randy Couture, that is a great all-time win. Rich Franklin, all-time win. Anthony Rumble Johnson, all-time win as well. Bisping, all-time win. Rockhold, these are all all-time wins, great wins as well. So although he has a lot of losses like Wanderlei Silva, you know, it makes up for it because most of his losses are from great people. I mean, Anderson Silva, John Jones, Randy Couture, Alistair Overeem. I mean, you can't really fault those, right? And all these other losses as well are from people that he's already beaten, right? So you can't really fault that, right? So Vitor Belfort at 36, I think, is a fair assessment. Next up at 35, I got Yoel Romero. Yes, Yoel Romero. I know he has not won a bout whatsoever, right? But his resume speaks volume. Man, I mean, look at this. He beat Luke Rockhold, right? Chris Weidman, Jakar Souza, Leon Machida, Tim Kennedy, Derek Bronson, who's not necessarily an all-time great. But, you know, regardless of that, these are all, you know, great all-time fighters, right? And his losses are great losses. As a matter of fact, one of the greatest losses of all time. I mean, look at the Whitaker fight, right? Both of them could have went either way, right? Even in one of them, you could argue that, you know, Yoel Romero should have won that. Clear as day. You know, Yoel Romero should have won that. His Adesanya fight, you know, could have been a split decision, right? It should have been a split decision. You could argue that Yoel Romero won that. His Costa fight, you can argue Yoel Romero won that as well. So arguably, you can argue that he's undefeated in the UFC. So if you count all of these, you know, quote-unquote robberies, right? He has an insane stacked resume, right? Imagine if you got the Whitaker win, right? Imagine if you got the Adesanya win. Imagine if you got the Costa wins. This guy's easily the top 10 greatest of all time, right? But he didn't, unfortunately, right? But the point is, he could have won those fights. He could have, you know, and that's not due to the fight, but that's due to the judging, right? He could have won those fights. I mean, the fans saw the other way. You know, the judges saw it one way, the fans saw it the other way. It doesn't matter. The point is, his losses are great, his wins are greater, right? Yoel Romero at 35 is, you know, it's a strong hot take, but I feel like he deserves a placement like this. I mean, arguably 4 robberies, right? So I can't even, you know, mark him down. I mean, to be fair, he doesn't even have any strong losses to even look into, right? So I can't even like even if he loses to Whitaker or Adesanya, right? These are great losses, right? But the point is, it wasn't even a strong loss, right? You can argue that he won those. I mean, think about it from this perspective. Imagine if you are a Adesanya fan or a Whitaker fan. Imagine, you know, from your POV, you can't even say that was a strong win for Adesanya, right? You can't even say that's a good win for Whitaker, right? That wasn't even a strong win. It could have been either way, right? So to say that is a strong loss for Yoel Romero is just unfair, you know? If you can't say that was a good win for Adesanya, how can you say that was a strong loss for, Yoel Romero? It just doesn't make sense, right? So anyways, Yoel Romero at 35. At 34, I got Davison Figueiredo, one of the most underappreciated champions in, modern history, right? A lot of people overlook this guy. I truly think he is, the second greatest flyweight of all time. And beside the flyweight wins, he also had wins, in the 135 weight class. He also got great wins as well. Let's just look at his wins, for example, right? He got one clean win over Moreno. He also got one draw. I get it. Moreno has the numbers over him. But regardless of that, Figgy has more quality of wins. He also got the 2 wins over Benavidez. One of the most dominant, if not the most dominant title fight in UFC history. I mean, go look at it, man. It looks like a holy crap. Like, dude, if you do value, the 2 Benavidez wins that Demetrius Johnson has greatly, right? You should value this 2 Benavidez win that Figgy has greater. If that makes sense, right? Just go look at the fight, man. This is the most dominant fight that I've ever seen in my life. And he did that twice, right? Regardless of the Benavidez win, he also got the Pantoja win, right? Who, as we know, Pantoja is one of the greatest flyweights of all time as well, having multiple wins over Moreno as well as Royval. He also got other quality wins, and being Alex Perez, who is also a constant top 5 contender, right? He also got Rob Font, who's a top 10 fighter, Chito Vera, who is a top 10 fighter as well, and recently fought for the belt. He also got a Cody Garbrandt win. I know Cody Garbrandt is on a decline, but it's really great for his resume. I feel so bad putting Davison Figueiredo at 34. Man, just looking at it, one of the greatest flyweights of all time, as well as moving up to the 135 division, right? Especially in this era, man, you got multiple champions, dominating this fucking division, right? And Figgy moves up and, is clearing these motherfuckers like it's nothing, right? Also knocked down Chito Vera, who's never been knocked down ever. Man, and he pretty much only has 1 loss in the UFC. If your name isn't Brandon Moreno, he has 1 loss in the UFC, bro. If he goes out and beat Peter Yan, bro, we gotta talk about, this guy being a legit top 20 fighter of all time, man. But at this point in time, I have Figgy at 34. So at a strong 33, I got Lyoto Machida. I mean, I would also like to mention his Rampage Jackson win as well. I get it, it was a loss, but in my opinion, I thought, Lyoto Machida should have won that fight, right? But regardless of that, let's just look at his resume. We got Rich Franklin, who's a top 100, BJ Penn, arguably a top 50, Tito Ortiz, right? That's an all-time win as well. Rashad Evans, that's an all-time. Shogun Rua, right? An all-time win as well. Randy Couture, that's a top 50 right there. Ryan Bader, that's a good win. Dan Henderson, that's a top 50. Gagot Musashi, top 100. Vitor Belfort, top 50. Man, is this guy's resume is fucking stacked, right? Even at his losses. Even with his losses, I mean, let's look at his losses, right? His recent losses, at least. Derek Brunson, Yoel Romero, Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman, right? Derek Brunson, is a decent guy, right? Yoel Romero, Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman, these are all fucking great fighters as well. So anyways, I got Lyoto Machida at 33, right? Not that many losses, right? Even when he loses, it's against strong top 50, GOAT fighters, right? So regardless, yeah. Lyoto Machida, 33. I think it's a fair placement as well. Now at 32, I got Shogun Rua. I feel like maybe Lyoto Machida should have been a little bit higher than him. But regardless, let's look at his resume. We got Big Nog 3-time, who is an all-time great. Overeem twice, all-time great as well. Rampage Jackson, top 50, right? Arona, who was a good win as well. Coleman, Chuck Liddell, that's a top 30 fighter of all time, right? We got Lyoto Machida himself. We got Forrest Griffin. That is fucking great wins as well. You can make an argument that Randoman at, 2006 Randoman was a good win, but, he was aging like BJ Penn. It was Randoman back in the days, around the 2005, 2006, 2007 era. It was like the Tony Ferguson of the era, you know what I mean? But the only difference between BJ Penn, Tony Ferguson, and Randoman is that Randoman wasn't getting knocked out. Randoman wasn't getting knocked out, right? He was just getting submitted by people that's just better on the ground than him, right? And that's the major difference. Now, looking back at it, I feel like Lyoto Machida should have been higher than him. But honestly, it really depends on how you value the 3 Big Nog wins and the 2 Overeem wins. Most of his losses he gained, past the John Jones fight, right? After the John Jones fight, I'm pretty sure he started losing, a few fights. But yeah, prior to that, man, crazy resume, crazy career. And I feel like around the 30 to 40s is where Shogun Rua belongs. Right, yes, JDS. Let's look at his resume. He beat Verdum, who's considered by many, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Stephen Strove, whatever. Yeah, who's also a great win as well. Crow Cop, that's a top 100 win. Shane Carwin, that's a great win as well, similar to Stephen Strove. Cain Velasquez, I get it, Cain Velasquez beat him twice afterwards, but regardless of that, Cain Velasquez, that's a great win, right? Frank Mir, that's another all-time win. Mark Hunt, an all-time win as well. And Stipe Miocic, pretty much the greatest heavyweight of all time, right? He beat Stipe, and yeah, I get it, Stipe went in there, beat him as well, but regardless of that, he got a win over Stipe, and it's aging like wine. And this guy's pretty consistent as well. Although he has some losses, he also got some wins over, newer generation heavyweights such as Derek Lewis and Tai Tuivasa. And it just shows you the longevity that JDS. However, it's just unfortunate to see him, lose 4 times in a row in his recent bouts. He lost to Saragon, which, Saragon has been, a top contender for the last fucking 4 years, right? Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who's, a good... it's a good loss in a sense, right? He's a top 5 fighter. Curtis Blade, top 5 fighter as well. And Francis Ngannou, right? So you can't even blame that. You can't even, mark JDS down for that. And the reason why he's this high at 31 in my GOAT list is because if you look prior to the Francis Ngannou fight, right? Because he lost 4 in a row, Rozenstruik, Blades, Ngannou, right? Prior to that, he's only really lost 3 people, right? He lost 2 times, or he lost 2 fights to Cain Velasquez, so that's 1, right? I'm pretty sure he lost against Alistair Overeem as well as Stipe Miocic. But regardless of that, those are all great fighters, right? And 2 of those are pretty much top 50 fighters of all time, right? You could argue that Cain Velasquez is a top 50 fighter of all time as well. So, prior to the Francis Ngannou fight, man, his record is pretty much flawless. Wow, you guys made it to the top 30s. Wow, you guys, stuck around for 40 minutes. I'd hope you guys didn't press on the timestamps, below. But if you guys did, it's okay. It's okay. I respect that. All jokes aside, I feel like, in the top 30s, you start to realize that all these motherfuckers have really good wins, and a lot of them as well, with little losses, right? These are the people that deserve to be in the top 30s, right? Little losses with a lot of great wins. And even when they do lose, right, it's against, quality opponents, right? Besides probably 1 person on this list, but that's for great reasons, right? And yes, I do understand that, this video might cause a lot of controversies, a lot of people might disagree with my takes, right? But people need to realize that, GOAT lists, the GOAT contentions, GOAT lists is always constantly changing. The reason why the majority of, newer fighters, people that has dominated UFC in the last 5 years are on the top 30 is because, they have more quality wins with little losses, right? It's mainly the reason why Royce Gracie and, BJ Penn isn't in the top 50. And the reason why I bring these 2 names is, everyone would agree that they dominated their own, respective era. They either stuck around a little bit too long, or the level of competition just simply got better. And that heavily damages your GOAT legacy. Like, we can agree that Anthony Pettis, isn't really an active fighter right now. His career has gone to a dormant state, well, at least in MMA, right? So hypothetically, if Charles Oliveira were to go on a, 5-fight losing streak, especially against unranked fighter, we might actually have to discuss the fact that, Anthony Pettis might be ranked higher, on the GOAT list than Charles Oliveira. So just keep that in mind when we're doing these, GOAT list rankings, right? So let's get into the top 30s. See, next up, I got Robert Whittaker at 30. I feel like Robert Whittaker is in an awkward place right now. He's one of those people that can easily fall out of the top 30 in this next fight. It's unfortunate because at its peak, I think Robert Whittaker was a top 20 fighter of all time, right? So regardless of that, let's just look at his. So we can all agree that Robert Whittaker has better wins at middleweight than he did at welterweight. Let's just look at this. Around the same tier level, I'll give Uriah Hall, Derek Brunson, Darren Till at that time. That was a solid win. Jarrett Cannonier, Calvin Gaston, Paulo Costa. These are fighters around the same tier level, right? Not necessarily top 100, but regardless, a solid contender and good freaking wins for Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya, because Israel Adesanya did beat these people as well, minus the Uriah Hall and Darren Till, right? Fuck it, slap in Vittoria as one of Robert Whittaker's good win as well. Remember, Israel Adesanya beat these contenders as well, and then Robert Whittaker went out there and beat them again. So it tells you a lot, right? So if Israel Adesanya wasn't the champion, then Robert Whittaker would still probably be dominating middleweight for a very long time. But yeah, I feel like Robert Whittaker is just in an awkward place right now. His next fight, right? If he loses, he's probably gonna fall call out the top 30. And if he wins, he might, get bumped up a little bit depending on, the type of win that he has. What if he beats Strickland, right? What if he goes out there and fights Usman and beats Usman, right? These are fights which can, possibly bump him up into the top 20s again, right? But regardless of that, I feel like he's just in an awkward place, and therefore I have Robert Whittaker at 30. Next up at 29, I got Randy Couture. Man, is this guy old, bro. If you are gonna talk about Yoel Romero transitioning into MMA relatively old, bro, we need to talk about Randy Couture actually winning fights, winning, bouts at a grandpa's age, bro. Age where, you would become grandpas, man. Glover Teixeira winning the bout at 42. 42, goddamn, bro. 42, Randy Couture, man, goddamn. That guy was winning bouts in 2 different divisions. And in both of those divisions, he was relatively small. He was small as fuck. Man, look at this photo. Look at this photo. Tell me how that's relatively. Guess what? He went out there and beat his ass. How the fuck? How is that even fair, man? I feel like the major difference between Randy Couture and, Glover Teixeira and Yoel Romero, these older fighters, right, is that, Glover Teixeira and Yoel Romero are, relatively big or, fairly sized for their own respective divisions. In contrast to Randy Couture, it's like the equivalent of, someone like Sean Strickland, right? Matter of fact, Randy Couture might have been smaller than Sean Strickland, right? It's like the equivalent of Sean Strickland, fighting someone like Tom Aspinall, right? And actually winning. Can you comprehend that? Like, that is fucking crazy, right? And he was in his mid-40s, severely undersized, fighting people twice the size of him, and actually winning. Man, that says a lot, right? I get it. He has a lot of losses, right? But he also has a lot of quality wins. I mean, let's dive deep into it. His resumes consist of, Chuck Liddell, which is an all-time win. He also got Vitor Belfort twice, who is another all-time win. He also got the Kevin Randleman wins as well. Back in the year 2000, right? He only lost to Chuck Liddell. So that is an awesome win for, Randy Couture, right? Kevin Randleman back in the days was pretty much undefeated, right? He also got 2 Pedro wins, right? If you don't know my boy Pedro, right? Back in the days, that's like, the ancient version of 2 Marvin Vettori wins, right? So that's aging pretty well for, Randy Couture. He also got a Tito Ortiz win. He also got a Mark Coleman win. These 2 fighters are, considered by many as an all-time great as well. He also got Tim Sylvia, which I did forget to put him on this list. To be fair, right? I feel like he deserves to be, included in the top 100 list. But man, oh man, bro. Tim Sylvia got a 40-pound advantage over, Randy Couture. He also got a 7-inch height advantage as well. And guess what? Randy Couture went out there and beat his ass. It might sound like I'm glazing, but at 44 years old as well, man. Dude, bro, 7-inch, height advantage, 40 pounds advantage as well. And, Randy Couture went out there and beat his ass, bro. That's like the equivalent of, Volkanovski beating middleweight Alex Pereira. Imagine that. Although he has some amazing achievements as well as some, amazing quality of wins, he does have a lot of losses as well, and ultimately that brings him down. But I feel like it's universally agreed upon that he deserves to be around this spot, maybe around the 25 to 40s position, around that place. So 29 I feel like is a solid place for someone like Randy Couture. So above Randy Couture, I got Conor McGregor. I feel like ranking Conor McGregor is so weird because based on his popularity, you either overrate him or underrate him. And not even trying to be biased or anything, but I feel like the 28th spot, even above people like Randy Couture, JDS, I feel like that is a perfect spot for, someone like Conor McGregor. I mean, let's just look at his, great wins, for example. See, in the 145 division, he got wins over Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, right? Chad Mendes. These are all great wins. So he got all-time wins in being Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier, maybe Chad Mendes, right? As well as Jose Aldo. Man, Jose Aldo was pretty much undefeated back in the days, right? And, for someone like Conor McGregor to go out there and beat him in 13 seconds, man. Sheesh. See, understand this. If you were to make a GOAT list in 2015, Jose Aldo would 100% be in the, top 5 greatest of all time. And for someone like Conor McGregor, who already has a, pretty good resume back in the days, right? To beat Jose Aldo like that, back in 2015, man, that would probably bump Conor McGregor up to, the top 10 greatest of all time back in those days. However, it's almost 2025, man. It's almost been 4 years since he's last fought. So, it's no surprise that he's falling out of, the top 20s, maybe soon top 30s, right? But let's just look at his other wins as well, especially in the lightweight division. I mean, he's beat Nate Diaz, right? Although Nate did submit him the first time, he did avenge his loss. He did beat Eddie Alvarez. A lot of people underplay Eddie Alvarez, saying that it's, not a great win. But man, I beg to differ. Eddie Alvarez, sure, he has a lot of controversial losses, right? But regardless of that, Eddie Alvarez is a solid all-time win. You know, beat an old man, Donald Cerrone. But regardless of that, you know, that's a good win as well. Donald Cerrone, you know, it's like a equivalent of a Donald Cerrone, especially an old man Donald Cerrone. It's like the equivalent of a Marvin Vettori win, bro. I'm saying it, yeah. One Donald Cerrone is like a Marvin Vettori win, honestly. But to be fair, you can make the argument that Conor McGregor should be higher. You know, you can probably make the argument that he's probably a top 20 fighter of all time. Not even joking, right? I mean, look at his losses, right? He lost to Nate Diaz, in which he avenged already, so we can overlook that. He lost to Khabib, right? In which Khabib is one of the all-time greats, right? He also lost to Dustin Poirier twice. But you know, Dustin Poirier, man, that's an all-time great as well. And other than that, those are his only losses. Man, Conor McGregor does have a fucking stacked resume if you think about it. Yes, but in my opinion, at this moment, you know, I feel like there's truly 27 other, you know, greater fighters than Conor McGregor, especially during this time. If he goes out there and beats Chandler, right, which we know that fight would probably never happen, but if he does, right, go out there and beat Chandler, you know, we might have to talk about, you know, Conor McGregor actually being in the top 20 again. But regardless of that, man, he hasn't fought in like 4 years. Yeah, and there's a great chance that Conor McGregor would probably never fight ever again as well. Without being said, you know, if he doesn't fight again and if he chooses to retire, I'm happy with putting Conor McGregor around the 30th place. You know, 25 to 30, I'm happy with putting him here. Especially his resume. His resume is pretty stacked. I mean, his losses are pretty much, you know, you can't really fault those much, at least. Especially since two of the people that's beaten him, you know, he already has a win over them. Right, Dustin Poirier and Nate Diaz, you know, they beat Conor McGregor, but he also has a win over them. So you have to look at these as well. You know, I feel like the 28th spot, especially for a guy that hasn't fought in 4 years, and you know, based on his resume, and to be fair, he does have a really great resume. Is a fair assessment. You know, putting him in the 28th spot for a guy that's potentially never gonna fight again. I feel like it's pretty solid. You know, if he does decide to come back, then we might actually have to discuss putting him a little bit higher, maybe around the 20s. Yeah, but regardless of that, you know, a solid resume, underrated resume in my opinion. You know, I have Conor McGregor at 28th, you know, around the 25 to 30s. You know, I feel like that is fairly fair for someone like Conor McGregor. Next up, in the 27th place, I got Chris Weidman. I truly think this guy is the third greatest middleweight of all time, behind Israel Adesanya and slightly above Robert Whittaker. It's just unfortunate to see that Chris Weidman never fought Robert Whittaker back in the days. I doubt it's ever gonna happen, but man, oh man, you know, 2017, 2018, I wish that fight, you know, would have prospered. See, the reason why I put Chris Weidman slightly above Robert Whittaker is because Robert Whittaker in general has more quantity of good wins. Chris Weidman has more quantity of all-time wins. And yes, I understand that he does have a lot of losses, 7 to be exact. However, that happened later on in his career. I mean, prior to the Luke Rockhold fight, he looked, you know, and deemed unstoppable. Man, he was looking like the next middleweight GOAT. I mean, let's just look at his resume. I do think, you know, the quality of wins that Chris Weidman has, you know, sort of makes up for the amount of losses that he has, you know, suffered. I mean, yeah, let's just look at the, you know, the amazing wins that Chris Weidman has. First of all, I would say Damian Maia is up there. Right, Damian Maia, that's a great win for Chris Weidman. He also beat Addison Silva twice. Right, I get it, the first time Addison Silva was showboating, but you know, that's just that's just Silva being a fucking dumbass, right? Well, he gets what he deserved, right? But anyways, the second fight, that was from a check. Right, a lot of people, you know, don't give Chris Weidman enough credit for that. That was from a check, man. Addison Silva twice. That is an all-time win. He also beat Lyoto Machida after that. That's another all-time win. Vitor Belfort, another all-time win. But then he goes on to lose to Luke Rockhold and then, you know, 2 other people, including Yoel Romero and Giga Musashi. But to be fair, they're both all-time greats. Well, matter of fact, 3 of them are all-time greats. But then later on, he beat Kelvin Gastelum. Kelvin Gastelum, you know, a lot of people underplay Kelvin Gastelum, saying that he's fucking trash and not saying that he's, you know, worse than the Marvin Vettori win, which, what the fuck? Like, I would say Kelvin Gastelum, especially during this time, is a better win than Marvin Vettori, period. I mean, let me quickly educate you why that version of Kelvin Gastelum is a great win for Chris Weidman. I mean, if we look at Kelvin Gastelum's resume, or, you know, his record prior to the Chris Weidman fight, you can make the argument that he's pretty much undefeated. You know, Kelvin Gastelum during that time, you know, his only 2 losses were from split decision, right? And that includes Neil Magny and Tyron Woodley. You know, Tyron Woodley, that's, you know, he's considered the 4th or 3rd best welterweight of all time by many, right? So, you know, it's aging so well for Kelvin Gastelum, especially during that time. But regardless of that, right, he was on a winning streak, you know, beat Johnny Hendricks, decent win at that time as well. I'm pretty sure that was on UFC 200. Tim Kennedy, that's an all-time win. You know, Vitor Belfort as well. I get it was a no contest, but, you know, regardless, Vitor Belfort, as well as losing to Chris Weidman in the next fight. And, you know, Chris Weidman went out there and submitted Kelvin Gastelum. You know, at that time, Kelvin Gastelum looked real good, man. And to prove that he looked real good, in this next fight, he beat Michael Bisping, right? No, I get it. It was Michael Bisping's last fight and everything, right? But, you know, regardless of that, Michael Bisping, you know, he ain't no slump, bro. He ain't no slump. He's one of the all-time greats. And then after the Michael Bisping fight, he beat Jakar Souza, who is another all-time win. So you're telling me at that time, Kelvin Gastelum wasn't a good win? Man, Kelvin Gastelum was one of the greatest wins you could possibly get at that time, man. And yes, Robert Whittaker did beat, you know, Kelvin Gastelum as well, but man, Chris Weidman beat a far superior version of Kelvin Gastelum, man. It's like night and day. See, I feel like the reason why most people won't agree with this placement for Chris Weidman is because he's simply above Robert Whittaker. You know, a lot of people do think Robert Whittaker is above Chris Weidman, but here's the thing, guys. I will explain to you why Chris Weidman is above Robert Whittaker. I mean, let's look at Robert Whittaker's best win. 2 close decisions against Yoel Romero, against 2 wins over Anderson Silva. I mean, come on, man, it's not even close. You know, Weidman beat the far superior version of Kelvin Gastelum. You know, Whittaker's next best win is probably, you know, Jakar Souza. And Chris Weidman has Vitor Belfort or, you know, Leo Machida. Come on, man. It's, if you think about it, it's not even close. It's not even close. Chris Weidman, you know, has the better resume in general. See, the only argument that you could possibly make for Robert Whittaker actually being higher on the GOAT list than Chris Weidman is the fact that he didn't go on a massive losing streak, and the mere fact that he had one, you know, close fight with Israel Adesanya. And that's about it. And that's truly about it. You could possibly say that he has more quantity of good wins as well, but man, it's sort of neck to neck, right? If you add up the quantity of good wins plus, you know, Chris Weidman's quality of good wins, it's, you know, it kind of cancels each other out, right? But other than that, this is the reason why I have Chris Weidman slightly above Robert Whittaker. At my 26th spot, I got Fabricio Verdum. You know, in Verdum's case, you could possibly make the argument that he's the 3rd greatest heavyweight of all time. You know, if it wasn't for the fact that, you know, he suffered a lot of defeats. See, I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna highlight his defeats first, rather than his amazing resume, right? So you get an idea of, you know, the type of losses that Verdum suffered, right? It's not entirely bad, you know, hint hint. Now you see, Fabricio Verdum has 9 losses, right? But 3 of them are fairly great losses. So firstly, we got Sergey Kharitonov, who, in which we established earlier, as, you know, a fairly underrated fighter. You know, is often overlooked and is not, you know, recognized by many people. Kharitonov, that's a split decision loss, so it's aging, you know, pretty well as well. He also got, you know, another loss in being Alistair Overeem, a majority decision loss, in which at that time, you know, looked like it was a complete and utter robbery. Honestly, even watching it for the first time, you could probably say that it's a robbery, but, you know, looking back at it, you can make the argument, you know, for Alistair's case, right? So it's not actually entirely that bad, but, you know, at that time, you know, it was a complete robbery, you know, said by many fans, man. Dude, watching it for the first time, you know, a lot of people truly thought Verdum won that fight. Easily. If you think, you know, the Reyes fight against John Jones was a robbery, man, Verdum versus Alistair, man, back in those days, man, jeez. You know, his other split decision losses against Alexei Olenek, who is, you know, a lot of people don't know who this guy is, but he's one of the pioneers of this sport. I mean, this guy got a record of 60-17. 16-17, bro. This guy is a well-established veteran, right? So, you know, regardless of those, right, he has a fair Bro, 1/3 of his losses are, sort of controversial, man. Verdum is legit. You could possibly make the argument that he's above Francis Ngannou, but man, I'm just gonna mark him down a little bit because of the amount of losses that this guy suffered, man. But regardless of that, I truly think Verdum's best wins, overshines Francis Ngannou's best wins. I mean, just look at this. Gabriel Gonzalez. We got, Alistair Overeem, Alexander Emelianenko, which is Fedor Emelianenko's brother. Another win over, Gabriel Gonzalez. He got Bigfoot Silva. He got Fedor Emelianenko as one of his wins as well. Roy Nelson, I mean, if you want to, mark that as a good win. He got Big Nog as one of his other wins. Mark Hunt, right? Cain Velasquez, right? Bro, these are all great all-time wins. I hate saying all-time wins, right? So I'm just gonna say the great wins. And, so far, these are all great wins. I mean, so far, prior to this, it kind of slowed down. He got a knockout loss over Stipe Miocic. He got a majority decision loss over Alistair Overeem. To be fair, looking back at it now, I'll probably give it to Alistair Overeem, although it's still sort of controversial. He did really well in the modern era as well, beating the likelihoods of Alexander Gustafsson, who is a great win as well. Myson Tybura, who is a constant top 10 heavyweight in the modern era. So far, man, Fabricio Verdum, geez, I feel like this guy is a underrated heavyweight by many, right? A lot of people only know Francis Ngannou. A lot of people don't know the legacy behind people like JDS, Fabricio Verdum, even Cain Velasquez. A lot of people don't know Cain Velasquez or Mark Hunt, the legacy of Mark Hunt and stuff. These are all great wins. And yeah, this is the reason why I have, Verdum slightly below Francis Ngannou, mainly because of his losses. He does in general have better wins, but his losses, man, I gotta look into those as well. But yeah, regardless of that, this is why I have Verdum as, slightly below Francis Ngannou. So yeah, my 25th spot, I got Leon Edwards. Putting Leon Edwards in my 25th spot, it's not too controversial, I would say, so I feel like there's no point in explaining myself too deeply. I mean, at the moment of this recording, Leon Edwards has a record of 22-4, and at his peak, he did have a 12-fight winning streak. I'm pretty sure it's 12 or 13, right? Not that it matters or anything, but that is fairly impressive. I mean, this guy has barely suffered any losses, and one of his losses he's already avenged twice. And his other loss, his first ever loss in the UFC at least, was by split decision. So it's not entirely a bad loss. If you're minusing the avenged losses and the split decision losses, especially in the UFC, right? He's only really lost to one person, in being Bilal Muhammad. I mean, in all honesty, you could possibly make an argument that he's, potentially close to the top 20s. Right? I mean, in some way, he is already close to the top 20s, but you can possibly make him, top 19, top 18, around those areas in the rankings if you're really trying to nitpick the criteria. But anyways, I'll give you my reasons why I have Leon Edwards at 25. So it's decent and good wins, which helps him, elevate. And the GOAT list is, RDA. We got Donald Cerrone. We also got Nate Diaz. Those are, the good to decent wins, right? You could possibly put, maybe Vicente Luque or current Colby Covington into that list as well. I do rate Colby Covington, a little bit higher than these other names, right? But regardless of that, he also got 2 great all-time wins in being Kamaru Usman. The reason why I have Leon Edwards at 25 and not a little bit higher is because of the lack of dominance. Yeah, I get it. He's winning these fights, but man, are they really close. And what sucks the most is that besides from the Usman fight, Leon Edwards is not known for knocking people or even submitting people out, right? He's more of a decision merchant than Bilal Muhammad, man. Now, here's a weird statistic, right? Leon Edwards only has 1 more finish than Bilal Muhammad. 1 more. That's it. And if you negate Leon Edwards' Usman's wins, right, his 2 Usman's wins, Bilal Muhammad unironically has a better resume than Leon Edwards in a more dominant fashion as well. So that says a lot, right? But it is a GOAT list, right? We must include all wins in general. And regardless of that, Leon Edwards does have a fairly stacked resume. As listed earlier, he got the 2 wins over Kamaru Usman, although Kamaru Usman was winning, the second fight, right, dominantly as well, 50 seconds away from, potentially becoming a top 5 of all time. Yeah, I'm gonna say a top 5 of all time. But yeah, that's just unfortunate. And third fight as well, kind of controversial, but I feel like Leon Edwards won that clearly. He also got a Colby Covington win, which is aging not that well at the moment, but it's still a fairly good win. You got a Nick Diaz win, RDA, we got a Cerrone win, we got a Vicente Luque if you're being generous. But yeah, man, Leon Edwards' resume is stacked. It's just unfortunate that he can't be ranked any higher because of his lack of dominance, right? Even beating Usman twice, man, to me, I think that's not enough, including the fouls and all the fence grabbing and shit. And as well as the second fight, right? Bro, Kamaru Usman was winning very hard as well. You know, he was 50 seconds away from being one of the greatest of all time. Winning that fight pretty much 10-8 everyone. No, that's an exaggeration, but essentially beating Leon Edwards in every single round. But anyways, I'll give you my take on how Leon Edwards can become a top 20 fighter or a top 10 fighter of all time. Now, you see, firstly, if Leon Edwards goes out there and avenges Bilal Muhammad loss, we might have to talk about Leon Edwards actually being in the top 20. And after beating Bilal Muhammad, if he goes out there and beats Kamaru Usman, no cheating, no fence grabbing, in a dominant fashion again, right, we might have to talk about him being greater than Israel Adesanya, right? Maybe the top 10 greatest of all time, right? If he goes out there and beats Hamza and Shavkat in a row, fuck it, put him in the top 5, right? We might actually have to talk about him, being toe-to-toe, neck to neck with GSP. Honestly, so that's my fucking take on how Leon Edwards can climb his way back up in the GOAT rankings. But at this moment, I feel like a top 25 position for someone like Leon Edwards, considering his lack of dominance, is, a fair assessment. Next up at 24, I got Frankie Edgar, right? Wins at 3 different divisions is actually fucking crazy, right? Wins that ages very well for him as well. I mean, look at the Charles Oliveira win. That is clearly aging very well for someone like Frankie Edgar. And this is why he is, propelled a little bit higher sometimes, right, in the GOAT list. I mean, let's just look at his best wins, for example. He beat BJ Penn 3 times. BJ Penn 3 times. A lot of people rate Volkanovski's win over Max Holloway 3 times highly, man. So why don't we do the same for Frankie Edgar, man? BJ Penn back in the days, man, that is a solid win. And he did that 3 times. See, out of the 3 fights he had with BJ Penn, right, he had 1 controversial, 1 finish, and 1 clear, clean win. Right, that sounds like a Max Holloway versus Volkanovski to me. He also got a couple all-time wins in being Sean Sherk, Charles Oliveira, who's, wasn't that Charles Oliveira that we know now. He also got a Yair Rodriguez win, who is, give or take a little bit similar to Ortega resume-wise, right? He also got 2 Cub Swanson wins, if you rate that highly. He also got Chad Mendes, right? So man, oh man, dude, Frankie Edgar does have a really stacked resume. And a lot of people will be asking, man, why isn't Frankie Edgar ranked higher in your GOAT list? If his resume is stacked, why isn't he ranked higher? Man, he has a lot of losses as well. 11 losses to be exact, but to be fair, he did fight in 3 different divisions, right? And to win some of these fights is actually crazy. But to be fair, he does have a good loss record in the sense that most of his losses are against, former champions or at least elite fighters. I mean, everyone in the UFC are elite, but man, these are like top 5 fighters in their respective divisions. Let's just look at some of them, for example. He lost to Benson Henderson twice, right? Benson Henderson is one of the GOATs. Jose Aldo twice. Aldo's one of the GOATs. Brian Ortega, that's a solid loss. Brian Ortega is one of the most underrated fighters, in modern history. Korean Zombie, right? You can't even blame that. Max Holloway, one of the GOATs as well. I mean, the point is, Corey Sandhagen, Chito Vera, right? The point is, these are great fighters that he's losing to. Majority of his losses are from great fighters. And this is why I rank Frankie Edgar so highly. A lot of people put him in the top 30s, top 40s even, right? But man, I do think he's close to the top 20 if you acknowledge his quality of wins and his, pretty much decent losses. Next up at 23, I got Henry Cejudo. I mean, man, his resume is, it's a high at best, if I'm being honest, right? You can make the argument that Frankie Edgar or Leon Edwards, maybe Fabricio Verdum is probably, a little bit higher than Henry Cejudo, but, regardless of that, let's just give my boy, the benefit of the doubt, right? He does have little to no losses, and in which most of it is, a little bit controversial, right? Controversial, bro. How the fuck was the Aljamain Sterling fight a split decision, bro? Aljamain Sterling dominated that shit. But regardless of that, man, Benavidez, okay, fuck it. I can relate to that. Benavidez fight, split decision loss, you know, that's alright. But anyways, for the most part, what elevates Henry Cejudo to the 23rd place is his dominance, right? For the most part, Henry Cejudo is fairly dominant, you know, against elite fighters as well. I'm just gonna keep this segment short, like Henry Cejudo. No, I'm joking. But what elevates him here is, you know, like I said earlier, his dominance, right, for the most part, as well as his lack of losses. You know, I feel like, you know, Henry Cejudo's double champ legacy is a little bit overrated, to be fair. I mean, let's just look at his wins, for example. I'm just gonna ignore his losses, right, because he barely has any. Let's look at his best wins. Firstly, he beat TJ Dillashaw, right, in the 125 division. And bro, TJ Dillashaw had no fucking right to go to 125 looking like that, man. Like I said earlier, man, that guy was depleted as fuck. He could have just tripped over and fucking get knocked out, in all honesty. And I think Dominic Cruz is Henry Cejudo's best win. Yeah, he went out there and beat him by knockout, right? So that is a fairly good win. I think knocked him out by kneeing him to the stomach or some shit, right? But anyways, that is a good win, right? Marlon Morales, that's another good win, right? A lot of people underplay Marlon Morales, but man, Morales was a solid contender. I think Morales is better than half of the people that Demetrius Johnson beat in his title reign, at least. Yeah, Henry Cejudo went out there and beat Demetrius Johnson as well by split decision. You know, a lot of people thought, you know, DJ won that shit. You know, including myself, I thought Demetrius Johnson won that as well. But to be fair, that fight could have been, you know, either way, right? It could have been to Cejudo or Demetrius Johnson, right? So, you know, for the sake of this argument, I'm gonna give Cejudo the benefit of the doubt, right? He also beat TJ Dillashaw, who, you know, did not belong there. I think in the entire fight, TJ Dillashaw threw probably one shot, right? One shot. If you're trying to be generous, I think TJ Dillashaw only threw one shot. That is fucking crazy. So anyways, regardless of that, those four are still solid wins, right? Goats of their respective division. So yeah, most of his losses are sort of controversial, and most of his wins are really great wins, right? Some are goats of their respective divisions, like I said earlier. And this is the reason why I have Henry Cejudo at 23. You can make the argument, you could make the argument that, you know, Leon Edwards is, or maybe even Frankie Edgar is higher than Henry Cejudo. You know, I truly think Henry Cejudo is one of those guys that is often, you know, people just look at his resume and see like, oh, TJ Dillashaw, oh, Demetrius Johnson, oh, Dominic Cruz, wow, great names, right? You know what, I'm gonna put him, you know, in my top 15, right? No, you can't do that, right? And I feel like for that reason, a lot of people just overrate him a little bit too much. So at 22, I got Dominic Cruz, you know, the former bantamweight GOAT. Yes, I said it, the former bantamweight GOAT. You know, at one point, maybe a year or two ago, you know, I would consider this guy to be the bantamweight GOAT. I'll say this though, if he did beat Henry Cejudo, yeah, you know, Dominic Cruz is a solid top 15 fighter of all time. You can make the argument that he is a top 10 fighter of all time, considering the lack of losses that he suffered. It's just unfortunate that his career has been tormented by, you know, years of injuries, you know, taking years off his, you know, professional careers. You know, what could have been? What could have been? What if Dominic Cruz kept on fighting, right? What if he kept on fighting? Like, you know, what could have been, man? But enough talking about the injuries. I feel like Dominic Cruz still has the accolades to prove that he's a top 20 fighter of all time, around the 20 areas to say the least. His best wins, arguably, you know, Demetrius Johnson, although it was at 135, but regardless of that, it's aging really well for him. I think he might have had the best aging win of all time, to be fair. Demetrius Johnson, damn, that is a good win. So yeah, Demetrius Johnson, if you negate Demetrius Johnson as his best win, you still got the TJ Dillashaw win. You know, that is his second best win in my opinion, although it was by split decision. Or still, regardless of that, it's still a decent win. And, you know, the cherry on top to his resume is, you know, obviously Uriah Faber twice, Joseph Benavidez twice, you know, who is, you know, at that time a solid contender. You know, Uriah Faber, that's, you know, an all-time great. Benavidez, that's an all-time great as well. So, you know, if we're just strictly looking at his wins, man, is his resume stacked. And even if we, you know, consider the losses, right, he's only lost to 4 people. I think his first loss was against Uriah Faber, but that was in 2006, right? 2006, man, that's crazy. But regardless of the Faber loss, he still avenged it, you know, beating Uriah Faber twice, right? I mean, he lost to Cody Garbrandt, and Henry Cejudo also recently lost to Cheetah Vera. But man, you can't really, you know, consider that too highly, since, you know, the years of inactivity, years of, you know, suffering with injuries and stuff. You know, hypothetically, if Dominic Cruz, you know, never fights again, he can still climb up in the rankings. He can still be a constant top 15 fighter of all time just by doing nothing. He does have a stacked resume which ages really well and favors him, to be fair. So he can literally do nothing just by the mere fact that other good fighters, you know, people that are ranked above him currently, you know, loses, you know, so they get dropped down a little bit, right? And that can just potentially push Dominic Cruz back up into the rankings. Like, for example, we can all agree that at this point in time, Alex Pereira is probably, you know, just a little bit higher than Dominic Cruz, right? But, you know, hypothetically, what if Alex Pereira goes on to lose 5 times in a row, right? Obviously, he's going to get dropped down in the rankings, well, the GOAT rankings in a sense, right? And that will push Dominic Cruz back up. That's the point I'm trying to make, right? Dominic Cruz has, you know, a resume which ages like wine. It gets better over time. It's just unfortunate that at this point in time, there are, you know, probably 21 other fighters with better resumes in it. Dude, Dominic Cruz can probably become the bantamweight GOAT again just by doing nothing. Just by the mere fact that, you know, the current bantamweight GOAT, you know, is underperforming, losing, you know, therefore dropping down in the GOATs list. See, if Dominic Cruz would have fought, you know, TJ Dillashaw again rather than Cody Garbrandt and beat him decisively, easy, I would put him in the top 15, right? But it's just unfortunate, man. You know, it's injuries and everything, man. It's just, and the years of layoffs, you know, cause him to lose some of these fights. Yeah, it's just unfortunate, man. So at this moment, I feel like, you know, a top 22 rankings, you know, he can move. He's one of those fighters that can just move up and down depending on, you know, who's he's surrounded by. And who knows, if Dominic Cruz never fights again, and if I decide to make a video like this, in, you know, maybe in a year's time or in the future, right, he might be even ranked higher just by barely doing anything, right? Just by doing nothing. You know, just the fact that, you know, people above him currently, you know, loses. Right, so I feel like at this moment, a top 22 place for Dominic Cruz, considering there's so many fucking good fighters at the moment. Just on a fucking crazy winning streak. Their resume stacked as fuck. Hasn't really been tested. But yeah, Dominic Cruz at 22 at the moment. I think is respectable for the time being, to say the least. At 21, I got Charles do Bronx Oliveira, one of my favorite fighters of all time. Everybody's favorite fighter, if I'm being honest. You know, nobody hates this guy. Nobody hates him. He's the most likable fighter, I swear to God. You know, just let you know, this segment was created weeks before, you know, the Charles Oliveira versus Chandler 2 fight. So I don't even know how that fight is gonna go. You know, I doubt it's gonna change much, right? So if, you know, Charles Oliveira goes out there and beats Chandler, right, we might have to talk about him, you know, being a top 20. Right, being above the next person on the GOAT list at least, right? So I don't even know how that's gonna go, so I'm just gonna, you know, base the consensus on the fight not happening yet. But if, I'm just saying it, right, if he beats Chandler, right, he's gonna be in the top 20, right? Or at least we have to discuss the fact that he is a top 20 greatest fighter of all time. I mean, beating someone like Chandler twice is actually crazy. You know, as much as people hate Chandler, you know, saying this guy is a, you know, one-trick pony, he's actually not a top 5 fighter of all time. Man, when is the last time you've seen an actual lightweight, you know, beat someone twice? I mean, think about Islam Makhachev, right? He beat Volkanovski twice, but he's a 145 pounder. I feel like, you know, even Khabib, right? He's never beaten anyone twice. He hasn't beaten Dustin Poirier twice. He hasn't beaten Justin Gaethje twice, right? You know, compared to these other fighters, I mean, Israel Adesanya beat Vittori twice. You know, Alex Pereira beat Yuri twice. You get what I'm saying? Like, most of these other fighters beat certain opponent twice, you know, elevating themselves higher on the GOAT list. I feel like the last time I've seen anyone beat someone twice in the lightweight division was Benson Henderson, or Anthony Pettis, right? Beating Benson Henderson twice. That's crazy, but I just like brain farted there a bit. But the point I'm trying to make is that beating anyone twice, especially in a lightweight division where it's not as common as other division, is an insane achievement, right? And it should be rated highly. You know, therefore, if, you know, Charles Oliveira goes on to beat Michael Chandler, man, he's a top 20 fighter of all time. But until then, he still has a relatively insane resume. And not even to be biased, like, if you're looking strictly on just the wins, right? You know, not performance and, you know, dominance and stuff like that. I mean, you could possibly make the argument that he has a better resume than Khabib. I mean, think about it this way. He's beaten essentially every single person that Khabib has beaten, you know, and a far better version, you know, of them as well. There's also a good version of great fighters that, you know, Khabib never fought, like I mean, Tony Ferguson, that's a decent version of Tony Ferguson that Charles Oliveira beat. Khabib never fought Chandler. Chandler was a top tier contender. Khabib never fought a decent version of Dariush, right? Sarukian, he never fought Sarukian, right? And almost finished Sarukian in numerous occasions, right? Almost finished Tony Ferguson as well. So the point I'm trying to make is, Charles Oliveira, you can make the argument that he has a better resume than Khabib Nurmagomedov, right? And which Khabib is easily, you can make the argument that he's ranked around the top 10. So what separates Charles Oliveira and Khabib, some may ask, right? And that's simply due to his losses. He has a lot of losses. Although, for the most part, Charles Oliveira is a dominant fighter, right? He does have a lot of losses, in which Khabib doesn't. So what brings Charles Oliveira down, in the GOAT rankings at least, is, from his tadpole era. Charles Oliveira's tadpole era. I mean, just look at his losses, right? He's lost to Jim Miller, Donna Cerrone, fucking Frankie Edgar, right? These three, it's fair. I'll let it slide, right? Those were great losses back in those days, right? But people like Cobb Swanson, that's barely a decent loss, man. That's barely a decent loss. Max Holloway, that's a great loss as well. Anthony Pettis, great loss. But the point is, people like fucking Ricardo Lamas, Paul Felder, how are you losing to these people, right? And ultimately, that just brings you down, a lot. I feel like if we're strictly just talking about, lightweight Charles Oliveira, man, Charles Oliveira would be a top 15 fighter of all time easily. But we gotta look into the 145, Charles Oliveira as well. And unfortunately, at 145, he did suffer a lot of losses, and that, that brings him down a lot. Yeah, let's just look at his great wins, which, elevates him to this 21 place. Obviously, the Dustin Poirier win, that's a great win, which ages really well. Dustin Poirier, considered by many as one of the greatest lightweights of all time. Tony Ferguson, at that time, was a really, really good win. So Tony Ferguson up there as well. Michael Chandler, that's a great win as well. You also got Justin Gaethje, Jim Miller at that time as well. That's a decent win in my opinion. Kevin Lee, if you consider that as a good win. Dariush, if you consider that as a good win. I mean, to be fair, Dariush was ranked 4 when Charles Oliveira fought him. Unfortunately, Dariush did lose his next fight against Arman Tsarukyan, but to be fair, that is aging really well. He also got Clay Guida as a good win as well, in my opinion, but it depends on how you look at it. But regardless of that, right, Charles Oliveira in general does have a great resume. His pretty much recent loss was against Arman Tsarukyan by split decision, and we know Arman Tsarukyan is fighting Islam next. And what if Arman actually beats Islam? Man, this split decision loss is gonna look real good for Charles Oliveira. It might actually put him into the top 15. Imagine the Chandler win, right? Imagine if Arman goes out there and beats Islam. Man, Charles Oliveira, top 15, I wouldn't even mind that. So to summarize, Charles Oliveira does have a really stacked resume. He has the potential, if he goes out there to beat Chandler, and if Arman beats Islam, he might be ranked a little bit higher. But, we gotta look into the losses as well. And at this point in time, I can't put him, above 20 other fighters, right? Considering his losses, I just can't, right? So at this point, 21 for Charles Oliveira. What is that noise? Do you feel that aura? Bro, oh my god, I feel like someone is here. What is that aura? Dude, you guys feel that? You guys sense that aura? What is that aura, bro? Holy shit. Holy shit, is that Alex Pereira? Yes. The king of aura, CEO of recency bias himself, Alex Pereira, bro. If you have Alex Pereira anywhere higher than 20, man, that is living proof of recency bias. I mean, let me explain myself, man. There's gonna be a lot of people hating on the fact that I have Alex Pereira at, my top 20 and not my top 10 or top 5 of all. Man, come on, man. Top 20 for Alex Pereira, that is fucking respectable, man. Anywhere higher than top 20, damn, that's recency bias, man. If Alex Pereira goes out there and beat Ankh, then we're talking. Then we can talk about Alex Pereira actually being in the top 15, right? But until then, top 20, man. He is a top 20 fighter. That's still good. Think about it, man. There are 19 other fighters better than you. Only 19 out of the 1,000 people that's ever fought in the UFC, man. Top 20 for Alex Pereira. That is fair, man. That is great. I mean, if we're being honest, his best win is Adesanya, right? By miles. By miles, his best win is Adesanya. And his second best win, in my opinion, is Jiří Procházka, because I'm not even counting that Jan Blachowicz as a win. I do think that was a robbery, right? I thought that was so fucking clear for Jan Blachowicz. A lot of people thought Alex Pereira won. Are you serious? Why do you think Alex Pereira won that shit? It was, close, back-to-back war, on the feet, right? And I feel like the cherry on top for that match was Jan Blachowicz takedown, right? Although he barely did anything with the takedown, that was the cherry on top to, make it decisive, for Jan Blachowicz. I mean, you can make the argument that Alex Pereira only has 3 good wins. I mean, Yuri Prochazka, undoubtedly that is a good win, and he beat him twice, right? So that ages pretty well. Strickland, that's a good win as well. Adesanya, that's a good win, but arguably Jamal Hill isn't even a good win. Anthony Smith is a better win than Hill. Vittoria's a better win. Costa's a better win than Hill. Like, are you serious? But I would rank, Khalil Roundtree win higher than, a Hill win any day of the week. I mean, Hill is unproven, man. He is unproven, and until then, Hill is not a good win. Like, if I'm being honest, light heavyweight has been the weakest it's ever been. Up-and-coming prospect like Yuri Prochazka had a close war against, a borderline retirement Glover Teixeira. And if Jamal Hill never had a title attached to his name in the first place, we wouldn't even be saying that Jamal Hill is a good win. And yes, I know a lot of people might be saying, oh, you an Alex Pereira hater. You a hater for... No, I'm not. I'm not trying to put him down by any means, right? I genuinely just don't think he's a top 15 fighter of all time. Well, not yet at least. Even if we count the Jamal Hill fight, as a great win, right? Fuck it, yeah. Jamal Hill, that's a great win for Alex Pereira. Even if we count that, right? I still don't see it, man. If he goes out there and beat Ankalaev, put him in the top 15. I'm happy with putting Alex Pereira in the top 50. Then we're talking. If we beat Ankalaev, then we're talking, man. But yeah, as of right now, I don't even think he's the 3rd best light heavyweight of all time. I know it sounds a bit weird coming from me, but like, I generally don't think he's the 3rd best light heavyweight of all time. Even if we count the Jan Blachowicz or Khalil Roundtree wins, right? I still don't think he's the 3rd best light heavyweight of all time. Alex Pereira, he's fairly dominant, right? He has a win over Izzy. He has a win over Strickland. A win over Hill and Jan Blachowicz, if you're not counting that as a robbery, right? Multiple win over, Yuri Prochazka, right? For the most part, these are good wins, right? But he does lack the resume. He doesn't have that, that strong top 50 of all-time wins other than Israel Adesanya, right? That's about it. Israel Adesanya is his only top 50 of all-time wins, and other than that, it kind of just slides off, Before you start hating, I'll tell you this one thing. Right, the stars are truly aligned with Alex Pereira. He has basically no losses in the UFC. All his fights are, for the most part, fairly dominant. The only thing that he's lacking, in my opinion, is, a good quality win. Right, if he goes out there and beat Ankalaev in a dominant fashion, right? Ankalaev, he's not an old guy, right? He's a fairly good guy on a solid winning streak. If he goes out there and beat Ankalaev in a dominant fashion, that's a solid top 15 in my book, right? If he goes out there and beat Tom Aspinall at heavyweight, because ultimately after the Stipe and John Jones fight, it's most likely that they're gonna vacate the belt, right? So there's a great chance that Alex Pereira is gonna move up and fight Tom Aspinall for the heavyweight belt, and if he beats Tom Aspinall, he's a top 5 fighter of all time. I'm saying it. He's the top 5 fighter of all time. So the point I'm making is, at this current point in time, Alex Pereira is a top 20 fighter of all time. But he's only a good win away from being a top 15 fighter of all time. So that's not even that bad. Alex Pereira, in my opinion, is the fastest GOAT, moving person ever, right? This guy essentially joined the UFC like 2 fucking years ago, and now he's already the top 20 greatest fighter of all time. Think about it. And he's only 2 quality wins away from being the top 5 greatest of all time. What does that say? In my opinion, I think top 20 at the moment is far more than respectable. People don't realize this, right? People think he should be higher, but goddamn it, bro. Top 20 is actually really respectable, considering he's only 1 to 2 fights away from moving fucking 15 places. 15 places. He's only 2 fights. Man, the stars are aligned with him. This guy has the potential to become the GOAT, right? In like 3 or 4 fights. The greatest of all time. Can you believe that? He's only 4 fights away from becoming the greatest of all time. However, at this moment, I truly think he's not even the 3rd greatest light heavyweight. If he goes out there and beats Ankalaev, then yeah, maybe he is the 3rd greatest light heavyweight of all time. But until then, I truly think there's someone else above him, and for great reasons. I will explain it in my, in the next segment, right? If he did beat Jan Blachowicz decisively, I would have put him a little bit higher, but he didn't, and that's unfortunate. And right now, a top 20 for Alex Pereira, who's only joined the UFC like 2 fucking years ago, that's so fucking good, bro. And people don't realize that. People think this is like disrespectful or something, but dude, man, gee, goddamn. Alex Pereira at top 20. Yeah, he's only 1 or 2 fights away from being literally a top 10, top 5 fighter of all time, and that is fucking crazy. The fastest moving GOAT list fighter, if that makes sense. But yeah, Alex Pereira at top 20. At top 19, I got Matt Hughes. Depending on how the next couple of Usman fights will go, bro, Matt Hughes can possibly become the second best welterweight of all time again. I feel like compared to the other, legends, right, Matt Hughes isn't talked about enough. I mean, on everyone's GOAT list, he kind of dwindles around the top 20 spot, right, around this area, right, from 25 to 15, around that area, right? But a lot of people fail to mention how, he can easily overtake Kamaru Usman. Obviously, I do think Kamaru is still a little bit higher than Matt Hughes in terms of GOAT rankings, but to say that he's far more higher, it's just unfair, man. It's just, I feel like, people around the 20s, they're so close to each other, like, 1 or 2 wins, like the Alex Pereira example, right? He's only 1 or 2 wins away from being in the top 5 or top 10, right? Same goes with Matt Hughes or anyone else in the top 20. They're only, a couple of wins apart from each other. That's the thing. What I'm trying to say is, if Kamaru Usman goes on to lose 2 or 3 more fights, and this time not by split decision or close, fights against like Hamza or like Leon Edwards, but actual, domination by the opponent, right? Kamaru Usman loses maybe by knockout or whatever, 2 or 3 more times, right? We might actually have to talk about, Matt Hughes actually being the second greatest welterweight of all time again. I feel like what hurts his GOAT legacy, brings him down a little bit is his losses later on, like later to the end of his career. I mean, his losses like, Josh Koscheck and Thiago Alves, kind of really just pushed him down a little bit. However, similar to Charles Oliveira, his best wins does make up for some of his losses. He beat a former champion in being Carlos Newton twice. Frank Trigg, Sean Shirk, former champion, GSP, future champion, right? What a great win, which ages really well, considering that GSP is literally the top 5 greatest of all time. BJ Penn, at that time, was a really great win. Matt Serra, who's an all-time win as well. Questionable wins. I mean, he also got Royce Gracie, if you're considering that as a good win. Another one in being Hayato Sakurai. Dominated Pride and really only losing to Takeru Nagomi. Yeah, I'm just trying to find things to put him down, but honestly I can't. I feel like Matt Hughes pretty much had no flaws. He was fairly dominant for the most part. He does have 2 bad losses, but that ages really well since he has great wins which outweigh them heavily. Yeah, if Kamaru Usman ends up losing his next 3 bouts or so, right, it's inevitable that Matt Hughes will be crowned the second king again. Next up, above Matt Hughes, I got Chuck Liddell. I truly think Chuck Liddell is the 3rd greatest light heavyweight. Do I think Alex Pereira is far away from Chuck Liddell? No. I feel like as time goes on, I feel like we can, all agree that competition gets, a little bit better, right? If Alex Pereira goes out there and dominate, Ankalaev, right, goes out there and knocks Ankalaev out, then yeah, maybe we gotta talk about, the fact that Alex Pereira might be tied with Chuck Liddell in terms of light heavyweight rankings. I feel like most MMA fans nowadays don't realize how good Chuck Liddell was. I mean, fathom this. Chuck Liddell beat 2001 Kevin Randleman. Kevin Randleman was basically undefeated in the UFC. And bro, rest in peace to the legend Kevin Randleman, man. A lot of people just look at his losses and base their consensus on those losses, right? Oh, he's trash. He's on a 7-fight losing. Oh, he's trash, right? People don't realize, man, but that version of Kevin Randleman pioneered the sport, beating people like Pete Williams, Pedro Rizzo, who's the top tier fighter, especially back in those days, right? But people don't look at this, right? People don't realize that just because they don't have name value, right? People don't look into these. Here's another underrated fighter, Jeremy Horn, right? A lot of people don't know Jeremy Horn. And yeah, Chuck Liddell beat Jeremy Horn and Randleman. Remember, Jeremy Horn has a record of fucking 91 and 22. 91 wins. A lot of people will be like, oh my god, he's never that good, Over 90 wins and no bouts? Oh my god, he was never that good. Quality over quantity, man. Quality over quantity. Well, I'll give you some quality. Well, Chuck Liddell beat, Tito Ortiz twice. That's an all-time win. I mean, we can keep going. He also beat Overeem, Alistair Overeem, who's an all-time great as well. Top 50 of all time. Let's keep going. He beat fucking Randy Couture twice. Randy Couture, who is a top 30 of all time, and he did that twice. Jeez, man. Beating someone like Randy Couture twice is a better win than Israel Adesanya. Period. Beating Randy Couture twice is better than beating a modern day Israel Adesanya. Beating Tito Ortiz twice, especially post 2007 Tito Ortiz, twice is far superior than beating Yair Prochazka twice. And that's not even debate. That's not even up for debate. Tito Ortiz post 2007 is a far better win than, Yair Prochazka. So what's next, right? What's next? Alex Pereira's third best win, arguably Strickland, right? Wow, Chuck Liddell beat Alistair Overeem. Bro, Chuck Liddell beat Alistair Overeem. An Overeem win is far superior than a Strickland win. It's far, far superior. I mean, I get it, you can count the Jan Blachowicz win as well. But to be fair, I only counted, Chuck Liddell's best wins. And typically, Alex Pereira's best wins are basically his only wins. Chuck Liddell has like 15 other wins, which I didn't even mention, including Vitor Belfort. I know someone in the comment section would be like, oh my god, but Alex Pereira is, more dominant. He knocked most of his opponents out, most of his opponents, right? They are knocked. Well, all the names I mentioned, all the fucking names that I mentioned, for Chuck Liddell, right? He beat them by knockout. He knocked them all out. Kevin Randleman, Vitor Belfort, Alistair Overeem, Tito Ortiz twice, Randy Couture twice, Jeremy Horn, all by fucking knockout. And you're gonna sit here and tell me Alex Pereira is higher on the GOAT list than Chuck Liddell? What the fuck are you? What are you smoking? And just a cherry on top, he did beat Wanderlei Silva as well. Chuck Liddell beat Wanderlei Silva. Man, how is this even an argument? I fucking hate this shit, bro. I hate these MMA fans that think Alex Pereira is like a fucking top 10 fighter of all time. It doesn't make sense. He hasn't done enough. Do I think Alex Pereira will eventually overtake Chuck Liddell? Yeah. Hell yeah, bro. If Alex Pereira goes out there and beat Ankalaev, right? Ultimately, that ties him, right? That's being generous. That's me being fucking generous, right? Him beating Ank ultimately ties him with Chuck Liddell. That is so generous if you think about it. Dude, if Alex Pereira goes out there and beat fucking like, I don't give a fuck, but like 2 other nobodies, right? Then fuck it, put Alex Pereira higher than fucking Chuck Liddell. But until then, Alex Pereira is the 4th best light heavyweight of all time, and Chuck Liddell's the 3rd. With that being said, Chuck Liddell barely has any losses as well. I do think Chuck Liddell had the best, one of the best retirements in terms of, placement of retirement. A lot of people get knocked out like fucking 5-6 times in a row and just don't know when to give up. Chuck Liddell is a perfect example of when to give up. Perfect career, man. Honestly. And his career strong. I mean, it's inevitable that, these newcomers will come and overtake you. They're younger than you, fresher than you, more skillful, more, better techniques and shit. It's inevitable that you will eventually, get surpassed by these younger people, right? And, I feel like Chuck Liddell just, hit the gaps at the right time, man. Yeah, so with that being said, this is why I have Chuck Liddell at a respectable 18, bro. Next up at 17, I got Francis Ngannou. At 17. No introductions needed. I feel like everybody knows the legacy behind Francis Ngannou, so I'm saving myself time here by not explaining too much. Well, simply, the reason why I have Francis Ngannou above everyone else is because of the lack of losses, right? And one of his losses he's already avenged. Other than the Derek Lewis fight, he's already avenged the Stipe Miocic loss, right? And bro, the Stipe Miocic loss isn't even a bad loss. We know Stipe Miocic is one of the greatest of all time. So it's not like it's a bad loss entirely. Do I think JDS or Verdum, has a better resume than him? Yes, hell yeah. I think Verdum has a far superior resume to him. But I do also think Overeem has a far superior resume than Verdum or JDS, right? But the point here is the lack of losses, right? Francis Ngannou has little to no losses at all, and that's one of the reasons why he's rated so highly on my GOAT list. In addition to the lack of losses, he does have really amazing wins as well. All-time great Stipe Miocic, who is one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. He also beat Curtis Blade twice, right? Curtis Blade, man, that's a constant top 5 fighter in the modern era, right? So beating someone like Curtis Blade twice, ages really well for you. Beat people like Arlovsky, who in name value wise is really high. Alistair Overeem, that's a good win as well. Arlovsky, Overeem, these are the top 100 fighters of all time. Cain Velasquez, who, arguably is a top 50 of all time. I feel like I made a mistake by putting Cain Velasquez at 58. I think I put Cain Velasquez at 38. I feel like Cain Velasquez should have been near the top 50s. But regardless of that, he beat Cain Velasquez, right? He also beat JDS, who's an all-time win, amazing all-time win, and beat, strong contenders like Cyril Gane. Yeah, I feel like there's no need to justify my placement here. I feel like his resume, his lack of losses kind of just explains itself, right? So therefore, I have Francis Ngannou at 17. At 16, I got the diamond, Dustin Poirier. A lot of people get mad at this as well, like, oh my god, why do you have the, DP higher than Charles Oliveira? Well, firstly, like I said, the criteria is not about title defense, but rather the quality of wins. And I feel like we can all agree that, Dustin Poirier, arguably has a better resume than Charles Oliveira. Do I think Dustin Poirier has a far, far superior resume than Charles Oliveira? Hell no. I think they're pretty close, right? But I do think Dustin Poirier slightly has the better resume, by 1 or 2 wins, right? I feel like the reason why people think Charles Oliveira has a better, resume than Dustin Poirier is because the win that he has over Dustin Poirier. I mean, just because you have a win over a certain fighter doesn't necessarily mean that you are above them in terms of GOAT rankings. I mean, Poirier just has some, simply great quality of wins, which, Charles Oliveira doesn't. I mean, let's just look at his resume, right? Poirier beat McGregor twice, right? Conor McGregor, that's a top fucking 40 fighter of all time. Top 30 maybe, right? He also beat Max Holloway, who is a top 10 fighter of all time. Spoiler alert, my bad. Yeah, he beat Max Holloway twice. He also beat people like Anthony Pettis, which, Anthony Pettis beat Charles Oliveira. So, I get it, MMA maths don't work. But here's a few other names, right? So, Dustin Poirier got Michael Chandler. He beat McGregor twice, who is an all-time win. Max Holloway, that's another all-time win. Anthony Pettis, all-time win. Justin Gaethje, Eddie Alvarez, all-time win as well. And, he got the lesser-known names. But, regardless, a solid win. He got people like Bobby Green, Jim Miller, Dan Hooker even, right? These are all great wins, regardless if all-time or not. Bro, a Dan Hooker win is, give or take, the same as a Ortega or a Yair Rodriguez win. Because I do think Ortega is higher on the GOAT list than Yair Rodriguez. But, a Dan Hooker win, that's equivalent to a Yair Rodriguez win. But yeah, don't mistake an all-time GOAT rankings with divisional GOAT rankings. Because, there's some fighters that fight in multiple divisions, right? And they do well between multiple divisions. You can't, correspond that with their own respective divisional GOATs, right? If that makes sense. And that's why I have Dustin Poirier, slightly higher than Charles Oliveira, although Charles Oliveira has that win over Dustin Poirier. I do think, I know, I get it. Charles Oliveira fought at 145, so did Dustin Poirier, but I do think Dustin Poirier was the more successful fighter at 145. He also had better wins at 145, as well as 155. I do think Dustin Poirier had the better wins at 155. People like Max Holloway twice, right? People like Conor McGregor twice, which Charles Oliveira doesn't. And that's simply one of the few reasons why I have Dustin Poirier, at 16, higher than Charles Oliveira, right? Simply said, that's it. I mean, all seriousness, you can possibly make the argument that Dustin Poirier, should be ranked a little bit higher. You can make the argument, literally, right? But the only issue was, his losses. That's the only issue. Is Dustin Poirier has a few losses, some really bad ones like Michael Johnson, people like Danny Castillo. The Korean Zombie one is aging pretty well because, back in the days, Korean Zombie was fucking a Maruda, bro. Cub Swanson, it's small shit like that, like, you can't really ignore it because, the losses is there right in front of your face, so you can't really ignore it and just overlook it. One thing I gotta say, though, is his losses, his wins, really outweighs the losses. Right, he has some amazing quality of wins, multiple crazy quality wins, and that heavily outweighs these terrible losses that he suffered. I mean, in order for Dustin Poirier to be maybe considered a top 10 fighter, he has to go out there and beat Islam or like a Charles Oliveira, which is still possible if you think about it, right? If he goes out there and beats Charles Oliveira or Islam Makhachev, right, which is still possible. I mean, he had a fucking war with Islam, stole some rounds, arguably, and yeah, until then, he is a top 16 fighter, and if he beats Charles or Islam, he might, we might actually have to talk about Dustin Poirier being in the top 10 of all time, right? Although his losses, right, he does have 9 losses, we might actually have to talk about Dustin Poirier being a top 10 fighter of all time. But yeah, Dustin Poirier at 16. Next up, in the top 15, I got Israel Adesanya, the second greatest middleweight of all time. and not by a long shot as well. You know, he can easily overtake Anderson Silva. I feel like Israel Adesanya is the only fighter on the roster right now that can possibly get a second win to their career. I mean, he's on a 2-fight losing streak, but ultimately he can easily avenge all his losses, right? Hypothetically, he could avenge the Sean Strickland loss, right, which will ultimately grant him the, you know, the title shot against DDP, right? Avenge that loss against DDP. What if he moves up after that, right, and beats Alex Pereira? Or not even that, right? What if he moves up, you know, and then fights Jan Blachowicz, right, and then gets granted the title shot and then beats Alex Pereira, right? Ultimately, the point I'm trying to make is that he can easily avenge all his losses, and by doing so, he can get elevated to the top 10, top 5 greatest of all time. For real, bro. Beating Alex Pereira twice, that is insane already. You know, beating someone like Jan Blachowicz, you know, and honestly depends on how he does that, right? What if he goes out there and beats everyone, you know, decisively, or just knocks everyone out, bro? That's an ultimate second win to a career. You know, the best second win to a career since Charles Oliveira. I mean, think about it. Israel Adesanya is undefeated in rematches. I'm joking, but I'm not. He is statistically undefeated in rematches. I know this won't apply, but you know, I feel like I should bring it up. I mean, for the most part, his losses are fairly decent. The Alex Pereira loss is aging like wine. Jan Blachowicz, that's a fairly good loss. Even the Strickland or the DDP loss, right? That's not even a bad loss for the most part. But that's not the issue here, right? His issue is not the losses, right? It's the lack of dominance, right? Little to none. I feel like we can all agree here that Israel Adesanya has possibly the top 5, top 10 greatest resume in all of combat sport history, right? But that's not the issue. I feel like most of his fights, you know, he's just not dominant enough. I mean, just take a look at the, you know, Robert Whittaker 2 fight. It literally could have been either way. Yoel Romero fight, it could have been either way. Jared Cannonier, way too close. Vittori fight, way too close, man. Calvin Gastelum fight, way too close as well, man. Like, the point I'm making is, man, most of these fights, you can argue for the other person. I know Israel Adesanya, you know, probably edges out, but come on, man, it's just way too close. However, for the most part, Israel Adesanya is a top 15 fighter of all time. Fighter, essentially, right? A lot of people rate him lowly, you know, because a lot of people just don't like Israel Adesanya, which I just don't understand, man. Israel Adesanya, I think he's a fucking good guy, right? But yeah, ultimately, Israel Adesanya is a top 15 of all time. And I mean it. You know, people that don't think Israel Adesanya should be ranked top 15 or at best a top 20 fighter of all time are just disingenuous, man. I mean, let's just look at his resume. He got Anderson Silva, all-time win, Whittaker twice, arguably. Alex Pereira, that's an all-time win as well. You know, Costa, which is a good win. Vittori twice, which is, man, that's like equivalent to a Bryce Mitchell win, if you ask me. But he does have 2 of them, so he gets upgraded. Maybe it's a fucking Ortega win now. two Marvin Vittori win is equivalent to an Ortega win, give or take. I don't go fuck. He also got a Calvin Gastelum win, a good version of Calvin Gastelum. Romero, question mark. Man, it could have been either way. It was, man, like, I don't even know how to rate that, man. Jeez, I don't know if I should give it to Israel Adesanya, give it to Romero, just give it to nobody. Like, if you watch that fight, like, you're just confused, man. But anyways, he also got a Cannonier win, which was way too close, man. Cannonier was like a round behind Israel Adesanya. If Cannonier won another round, he would have, you know, stolen the belt, man. That was way too close. But regardless of that, man, these are all great wins. So yeah, Israel Adesanya is undeniably a top 15 fighter of all time. You know, he has the opportunity, the potential to even go like beyond, bro. He has the opportunity and the potential to be a top 10 fighter easily. He has the chance to avenge all his losses, you know, become the new generation GSP type shit, right? But yeah, until then, I have Israel Adesanya at top 15. At 14, I got Anderson Silva. You know, the only reason why Anderson Silva is, you know, close to Israel Adesanya and, you know, at the 14th space, at the 14th spot is because of his losses. He has plenty of losses, which just doesn't age well, right? If we negate the losses, right, this guy's easily a top fucking 5 of all time. Easily, but man, we gotta consider the losses, right? And he has heck loads of them. I mean, let's just highlight his decent wins. So we got Hayato Sakurai, right, who we established earlier as, you know, a good fighter, especially what he did in Pride. He also got Carlos Newton. He also got Jeremy Horn and Rivera, right? These 4 are great, you know, decent wins, right? He also got all-time wins in being, you know, Rich Franklin beat him twice. Dan Henderson, one of the greatest fighters, to have never touched gold. Forrest Griffin, another amazing fighter as well. Damian Maia, Chael Sonnen twice. I know one of them was, fairly close, in which, Chael Sonnen was like fucking 2 or 3 minutes away from, beating him. But regardless of that, Chael Sonnen beat him twice. He also beat people like, Vitor Belfort, as well as, Stephen Bonner, which, some people don't rate Stephen Bonner highly, but, I do consider him as one of a great fighter as well. I feel like I rank him closely to like modern day fighters like Derek Brunson. In my opinion, I think Anderson Silva's resume towers over Israel Adesanya's resume, but the reason why he's only ranked 1 above Israel Adesanya is because of his losses. He has way too many losses. Compare that to Israel Adesanya, who only has like 4 losses, man. Like, losses matters, man. So therefore, I have Anderson Silva, at the 14th place, just 1 above Israel Adesanya. And Israel Adesanya is probably like 2 wins away from surpassing Anderson Silva. If he, beat Alex Pereira again, and maybe Strickland or something, bro, slap him above Anderson Silva comfortably. But until then, I have Anderson Silva at the top 14th place. Next up at 13, I got Murad Davash. See, I'm not gonna go too in depth with it because I already made a video about 2 or 3 months ago. I'll put it at the end of this video, but I highly recommend you guys watch it. In summary, if you value Khabib's dominance highly and rank him, so highly because of Khabib's dominance, you should do the same for Murad. And Murad is fairly dominant, right? And arguably 2 of his losses, should have been awarded to Murad, right? Murad should have won those matches. But yeah, you should totally watch that video if you're interested. Link in the description below as well as at the end of the video. So yeah, at this point in time, I have Murad above Anderson Silva as well as Israel Adesanya, and being 13th. I know this might catch people by surprise, but in the 12th place, I got Demetrius Johnson. A lot of people might say this is disrespectful to put Demetrius Johnson at 12, but purely based on my, criteria, and I gotta be consistent, right? I have to put Demetrius Johnson at number 12. If this was based on title reigns, fuck yeah, bro, he's the greatest of all time, if not one of the greatest of all time, right? But we're not, unfortunately. We're purely looking based on resume, their wins, the great wins, right? How they won those fights. And to be fair, Demetrius Johnson was, fairly a dominant champion. But the thing that, that puts Demetrius Johnson down is, purely based on the lack of quality wins. If I'm being honest, if it wasn't for the lack of dominance and this, essentially great title reign, man, Figgy has a better resume than Demetrius Johnson. Without further ado, let's put some respect on Demetrius Johnson's name. He does have a pretty decent resume, for the most part at least. I mean, his Cejudo win is... his Cejudo and Benavidez win is actually carrying him so hard. Especially that Benavidez at that time, he did have 1 split decision win against Benavidez, although I thought it was clear for Demetrius Johnson. It shouldn't even be a split decision, but it's whatever. So he got a Cejudo win, which ages like wine. A lot of people thought he beat Cejudo for the 2nd time as well, in which, I thought as well. But other than the Benavidez win, Cejudo wins, which are, arguably top 50 all-time wins. He also got the Kyoji Horiguchi wins, top 60 of all time. A lot of people don't know Kyoji. He fucking... insane resume, Kyoji. If you look him up, bro, he's actually like fucking stacked, especially in Risen, bro. He's undefeated, man. Beat Kaya Sakura, who's fighting Pantoja next. So yeah, Kyoji Horiguchi is legit. It's a good win for Demetrius Johnson. He also got John Dodson, which I don't know how I should rate him, to be fair. A lot of people beat John Dodson, but for the sake of this argument, let's give John Dodson, as a good win for Demetrius Johnson. He also beat, Ali Bagutinov, who was give or take the same as Brandon Royval in those days, right? In 1 championship, he also beat Adriano Morales, if you want to consider that as a good win. But to be fair, I think, Kyoji Horiguchi, Benavidez, Cejudo, arguably Ali Bagutinov, right? That's a better win than Adriano Morales. But, if you want to, include that as one of Demetrius Johnson's best win, then, go for it. Go for it. But regardless of that, I do think there's other people with better resume. What's carrying Demetrius Johnson right now is his longevity, his dominance, right? But what puts him down is his, lack of quality wins, right? Maybe if he beats Cejudo again, right? If he beats Cejudo for like the 2nd time, maybe we're talking about, Demetrius Johnson actually being in the top fucking 10, right? Maybe if he beat, Kyoji Horiguchi for the 2nd time again, yeah, he's a top fucking 5 fighter of all time. But until then, I feel like he just doesn't have enough quality of wins compared to these other fighters. You'll see soon. You'll see these other fighters have amazing quality of wins, and you know that's unfortunate because you know Demetrius Johnson, right? He is an amazing guy, amazing fighter. You know, pound for pound, probably the greatest of all time, right? But it's just unfortunate because it wasn't his fault. It's not even his fault. The fact that you know, the competition was so low back in those days, right? Remember, it's not even an argument that, you know, nowadays, you know, people that are fighting Brandon Royval, people are fighting Brandon Moreno, Figueiredo's time, the 125 division is better than ever. Right, and you know that's unfortunate because Demetrius Johnson was one of the pioneers of the sport, right? Well, in terms of the 135 and 125 divisions at least. But regardless, you know, that being said, he barely has any losses, which elevates him quite highly as well. And overall, I don't see Demetrius Johnson ever falling out of the top 20. Right, he has that type of resume, which, you know, yeah, he can drop down a couple, maybe he can get bumped up a little bit sometimes, right? But regardless of that, he hits a still point, right? He can never, you know, jump out of the top 20 based on his pure resume, his dominance, and his lack of losses. You know, therefore I have him, you know, at the 12th place. Who knows? Maybe in a year's time he'll, you know, jump back up into the top 10. Maybe a couple years time, you know, these other people that are currently ranked higher than him loses a bunch, right? Who knows? Maybe he can be, you know, top 3, top 5 again. Right? He just has that type of resume. But until then, I have Demetrius Johnson at rank 12. See, at the 11th spot, I got Jose Aldo. I won't go into depth with this, but you know, there's always this argument like, who is higher, Anderson Silva or Jose Aldo? Anderson Silva, but you know, I truly think Jose Aldo has the better resume. I mean, at his pure best, bro, Jose Aldo looked unstoppable. He was dominant, has amazing quality wins. The only thing that's kind of dragging him down is his losses. But to be fair, most of his losses are from, you know, either great people, great fighters, or former champions. I'm pretty sure the statistics are like 70 or 80% of his losses are from former or future champions. And most of the people that he's lost to ended up being relatively dominant. I mean, list of names that Jose Aldo beat, you know, Uriah Faber twice, that's an all-time win already. Frankie Edgar twice, all-time win. The Korean Zombie, that's the top 100. Mike Brown, a lot of people don't know Mike Brown, but he dominated WEC, which was the organization that Jose Aldo fought in prior to this as well, or prior to the UFC. Jose Aldo was already a champion in another organization. Jose Aldo is a very, very dominant champion. You know, reigned undefeated for 10 years, man. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, once they see the Conor McGregor lockout, you know, they just ignore the legacy of Jose Aldo. You know, Conor McGregor knocked his ass out in 13 seconds, and all of a sudden, you know, the last 10 years is nothing. It meant nothing to most people. It's fucking crazy, man. You know, Jose Aldo beat people like Chad Mendes as well. Beat Kenny Florian, who challenged for the lightweight bout numerous times. You know, against BJ Penn, Sean Shark, you know, you name it, man. Kenny Florian is legit. Lesser known names, he also beat people in the 135 division. At 145, he beat Moicano as well. As we know, Moicano is turning out to be a really great up-and-coming prospect, especially in the lightweight division. Not really a prospect. I mean, he's been in there for, you know, fucking countless years, but he's turned out to be a very promising lightweight, you know, contender. He also beat Chito Vera, who formerly challenged Sean O'Malley for the 135 bout. He beat people like Rob Font, who is arguably a top 15 modern day fighter. Jonathan Martinez, another top 15 modern day fighter. Man, Jose Aldo is consistent as fuck, bro. Like, most of his wins are great. It's great. Even out of his prime, he's still, you know, doing fairly well. He's arguably still a top 10 modern day fighter, which is insane, man. It's insane considering his longevity. He's been in the sport for over 15 years and he's still a top 10 modern day fighter. Damn, I wish I could put Aldo higher, but at this current state, I do think there's other people slightly better than him. To summarize, I do think Jose Aldo is, you know, slightly better than Anderson Silva all time at least. Just by the mere fact that he, I wouldn't say dominated, but he did well in 2 different divisions. So did Anderson Silva, to be fair, but you know, I feel like Jose Aldo is more consistent, losing to the better fighters in a sense, right? Had a better all-time win. So yeah, I feel like eventually Jose Aldo might overtake Volkanovski again, just by the mere fact that Volkanovski is clearly on a slow decline. But yeah, anyways, I have Jose Aldo currently at rank 11. For my top 10, this is slightly debatable, but I have Kamaru Usman. You can possibly make the argument that Usman is, below Demetrius Johnson. But regardless, I do think he's above Israel Adesanya, currently at least. Just by the mere fact that his losses are just so much better. I mean, you can make the argument that his losses are one of the best losses ever. I mean, he had 2 fucking close matches in which should have been a draw at best. I mean, fair enough. The Leon Edwards 3 fight, I'll give it to Leon, right? That's fair. But man, you gotta consider the fence grabbing and shit. Damn, that low-key unfair as fuck. But regardless of that, the Hamzat match, right? The Hamzat fight should have been a draw at best. At best, it should have been a draw. And we know how great Hamzat is. Hamzat is pushing that top 100 greatest of all time, right? If he has one more win, then bro, put him in the top 100 greatest of all time. Dude, he went out there and beat Robert Whittaker in the first round. So that's aging really well for Usman. I think my justification for putting Usman this high is purely based on dominance. I mean, he's never really had, prior to the Colby Covington 2 fight, he's never really had a close decision, right? Every single match, every single fight against great fighters as well has always been dominant, right? Dominant as fuck. One of the most dominant welterweight we've ever seen. I mean, even throughout the UFC, he's only lost 3 times, and all 3 of them are fairly good losses. I know one of them was a head kick KO, but prior to that KO, like fucking 50 seconds away from, winning this match decisively, right? He was winning every single round against Leon Edwards, every single round. Until the leg kick KO, right? But regardless of that, he was winning the fight. But man was mere seconds away from winning, right? Winning decisively as well. It wasn't like a back and forth war, it was a dominant war, right? Until the head kick KO. It wasn't like a, Yair Rodriguez Korean Zombie type shit, right? Where the Korean Zombie was clearly winning, right? But Yair Rodriguez was, winning some rounds as well. In contrast to this, Leon Edwards, arguably lost every single round prior to the head kick. Right, so that's the difference here. But regardless, that is his only, bad loss, right? It's just, think about it, that's his only bad loss. A fight that he was dominating and he got caught in the loss, let's just say 50 seconds, right? That's his only bad loss. Picture that, man. His second worst loss was probably against Leo Edwards again for the 3rd time. I mean, at best, you can argue that was a draw, but, I'll give it to Leon. Right? He did win, the majority of rounds, right? Even with a point deduction, I would say Leon Edwards still kind of just edges us out. But other than that, the Hamzat fight should have been a draw at best. And yeah, that's it, man. Usman is pretty much flawless. I mean, let's just look at Usman's resume, for example. He beat Colby Covington twice. Kobe has an insane resume. People just don't realize it, man. Kobe has an insane resume. I know he's on a decline right now, but Kobe is, he's a legit fucking contender, right? With amazing win, right? Maybe not as good as Benavidez, right? But, he's up there, right? Next up, we got, Masvidal, right? Masvidal twice. Okay, fair enough. Masvidal twice. It's an alright win at best, right? Burns. Gilbert Burns. Fair enough. Masvidal, Gilbert Burns, they're okay wins. But he got the Woodley wins, who we established earlier. Tyron Woodley, that's, top 5 welterweight of all time. Arguably the 4th best welterweight of all time. He also got an RDA win, one of the greatest of all time. Damian Maia, one of the greatest as well, right? He also got a Sean Strickland win, which ages very well for him. And guess what? He also has a Leon Edwards wins. Yeah, he has a Leon Edwards win. So man, dude, Usman's resume is stacked. I do think he deserves to be mentioned in the top 10. And yeah, I feel like the reason why people don't put him in the top 10 is because they compare him to Israel Adesanya, right? They dominate, their respective divisions around the same time, and people just compare them to each other, right? Which is just unfair. I do think Usman at this current state, is slightly better than Israel Adesanya, resume-wise at least. He's the more dominant, that's for sure. He has the better losses, period, right? And regardless of that, man, Usman at 10, I think that is very respectable. At number 9, I got Stipe Miocic, possibly the greatest heavyweight of all time. I know, I made this, list prior to the John Jones fight. I don't even know how the fuck it's gonna go. If he beat John Jones, we might actually have to talk about, in a dominant fashion, right? If we might have to talk about, Stipe actually being the top 3 or top 2. So, neck to neck with GSP, right? He does have the resume, the accolades to back it up. If he beat John Jones, yeah, we might have to talk about him actually being the 3rd or 2nd greatest of all time. But until then, I have Stipe Miocic at 9. I mean, let's just analyze his, resume, right? He was fairly dominant for the most part. His losses are great. I mean, I'm pretty sure most of his losses, other than Stefan Struve, right? He's basically has a win over them already, like Francis Ngannou, Daniel Cormier. He already has a win over them. So, it's not entirely a bad loss, right? Regardless of that, he does have amazing all-time wins as well. With the lesser known names, we got, Gonzaga, right? Who's a decent, fucking fighter as well. Mark Hunt, all-time win. Alistair Overeem, another all-time win. He does have an Arlovski win, and that's another all-time win as well. Some great wins, right? We got Fabricio Verdum, that's one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. He got JDS, another great win as well. I'm pretty sure he lost to JDS, but he also avenged the loss. He also got Ngannou. He also got Daniel Cormier twice. He beat DC twice. I feel like that's one of the reasons that he is ranked in the top 10. Beating Daniel Cormier twice, that is a fucking insane achievement. So yeah, I think it's not even up for debate, the fact that Stipe Miocic belongs in the top 10. And even if he loses to John Jones, I don't think it changes much, to be honest. I think he stays where he belongs, and being, the top 10. And in my GOAT list, I have him as rank 9. At rank 8, above Stipe Miocic, I got Alexander Volkanovski. This is gonna get people hella fucking mad, right? But think about it, right? This is not divisional GOATs, right? If I'm making a list about who the greatest 145 fighter of all time is, then it's most likely gonna be Volkanovski, right? But this is greatest of all time. So, wins from multiple divisions are included, right? And we gotta consider those as well. I won't explain it too much in this segment, right? You could probably guess Max Holloway is higher, and I'll go more in depth into the Max Holloway section and why I think Max Holloway is above Alexander Volkanovski all time. But until then, let's just highlight Alexander Volkanovski's greatest wins. I feel like Volkanovski's road to fame is beating Max Holloway 3 times, and people fail to realize, man, the first fight was like the equivalent of Islam versus Volkanovski fight. Obviously Volkanovski won the first fight in my opinion, right? But it was fucking close at that time. People thought it could have been either way, right? The second fight happened, right, against Max Holloway. Man, you're telling me that could have been a draw at best? Man, you're telling me Volkanovski won that shit clear? It's just actually like crazy to say. Bro, it was closer than a lot of people thought it would be. At best, it could have been a draw. At best, it could have been either way, right? To say that was a dominant performance by Volkanovski and that should be awarded, a fucking full marks for Volkanovski is just simply unfair. Right? So you're telling me Volkanovski beat Holloway 3 times and 2 of them, were fucking, fairly close, right? And one of them could have been either way? Dude, that's actually ridiculous. But other than that, let's just give, Volkanovski the benefit of the doubt. He beat Max Holloway 3 times, although 2 of them were kind of, a little bit controversial, and one of them was hella fucking controversial. But yeah, let's give him the benefit of that. Arguably, his second best win is Jose Aldo. Fair enough. He beat them. He beat Aldo by decision. I mean, he got other wins as well, in beating Ortega. He beat him by decision. He beat the Korean Zombie as well, up by, TKO at round 4. Yair Rodriguez, that's a, decent win, at least at that time, especially after the Islam loss. He also beat Chad Mendes. But, other than that, that's it, bro. That's it. His resume is kind of just carried by the Max Holloway wins, and 2 of them were kind of, a little bit fishy. If he did beat Max Holloway, 3 times decisively, no controversies, then yeah, then we're talking. Then we can like put Volkanovski above Max Holloway. I'm happy with that. But the fact that, one of the fights could have been, a draw at best or awarded to Max Holloway, right? It doesn't sit right with me, you know what I mean? And the fact that most of his other wins, other than Aldo, just kind of just lacks, right? I just can't put Volkanovski any higher. Remember, I'm not saying, Volkanovski is bad or worse than Max Holloway by any means, right? I'm not even saying that. I'm agreeing with you guys, the fact that, Volkanovski is higher on the GOAT list in terms of divisional GOATs, right? If we're talking strictly on 145, then yeah, Volkanovski is a better GOAT than Max Holloway. But no, that's not the case, right? We're talking about GOATs of all time, and and GOATs apply to multiple divisions, right? Max Holloway fought in multiple divisions and he was successful. So we gotta look into those as well. And therefore, I think Max Holloway, in terms of overall GOAT rankings, is higher than Volkanovski. Not divisional GOATs, right? Overall GOATs. Above Volkanovski, I got Islam Makhachev, right? I do think he has possibly the second greatest back-to-back wins of all time in being Charles Oliveira as well as Volkanovski, essentially stealing their undefeated streak. Which, wait, that doesn't even make sense, right? I mean, Volkanovski was undefeated, fair enough, but, you know, Charles Oliveira was on a massive fucking winning streak as well. So Islam Makhachev just came out of nowhere and just yoinked Charles Oliveira and, you know, Volkanovski's winning streak is actually crazy. You know, a lot of people don't talk about it enough, right? People, you know, idolize Elias Topuria, Max Holloway, Volkanovski back-to-back win, but people forget, man. People forget about the Islam, Charles Oliveira, and Volkanovski back-to-back wins. I mean, what they have in common is the Volkanovski win, but, man, it depends on how you view it, honestly. If you value Charles Oliveira's winning streak, massive winning streak, higher than knocking out Max Holloway, then yeah, I'm gonna give a quick run through on why I have Islam at 7. You know, I feel like I don't have to explain myself too much. Everyone knows who Islam is. I mean, it's 2024, man. Like, everybody knows this guy. He's not a Verdum, he's not a JDS, he's not like a fucking, I don't know, fucking Arlovski or something where a lot of people just don't know who they are. But yeah, I mean, let's just highlight his best win. Obviously, Dustin Poirier. It was, I mean, I wouldn't say it's close, but man, Dustin Poirier like pushed the fuck out of Islam Makhachev, right? He was pushing these fights, right? Essentially, you know, arguably stealing some rounds. He beat Alexander Volkanovski twice, who we established earlier is a top 10 fighter of all time. He also beat Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira is pushing, you know, top 20 fighter of all time. At one point, I do believe that Charles Oliveira was a top 15 fighter of all time. Dude, he also beat, you know, lesser known names such as Bobby Green, you know, Dan Hooker. That's a good win now. He also beat Arman Tsarukyan, who we know that is fighting Islam Makhachev again. What if Islam Makhachev beats Arman Tsarukyan for the second time? Man, we might actually have to talk about, you know, Islam being a little bit higher. But regardless of that, Islam Makhachev prior to the Dustin Poirier fight is fairly dominant, and that's one of the criteria that I'm basing the GOAT list on. I mean, if you ask me, who do I think has a better resume, Israel Adesanya or, you know, Islam Makhachev? 100% I agree with it. I would say that Israel Adesanya has a far superior resume than Islam Makhachev. You know, I know a lot of people won't agree with that, but I do think Israel Adesanya has a better resume than Islam Makhachev. The only difference is that Islam Makhachev is more dominant than Israel Adesanya, and that's one of the reasons why I have Islam, you know, at the position that I'm ranking him right now. But regardless of that, I do have Islam above Volkanovski. There's a great chance that he might be ranked a little bit higher in the future, especially after he beats Arman Tsarukyan. There's a great chance that he might fight Charles Oliveira again, and who knows, maybe he'd be ranked in the top 5. But until then, I have Islam Makhachev at a strong 7. At the 6th placement, I got Fedor Emelianenko. I get it, he's not in the UFC and shit, but man, I mean, I feel like it's becoming a meme at this point, bro. What is a MMA GOAT list? What is a UFC GOAT list without including the only guy that's not in the UFC? Fedor Emelianenko. Right? He's never fought in the UFC, right? But a lot of people still include him in their UFC GOAT list. So, you know, why don't I do the same, right? You know? But all jokes aside, if he did fight in the UFC, I would place him around this ranking. In the future, I will make a video explaining why I put Fedor around, you know, this ranking, in the GOAT list at least. And if I do make it, right, I will put it down in the description below. I won't talk about Fedor too much since this is strictly on, you know, UFC, right? So, and to be fair, this video is relatively already long. So if you're interested in my justification for the Fedor placement, in the GOAT rankings at least, hopefully there will be a video in the description below. And yeah, moving on, I got Max Holloway at the 5th place. This is heavily gonna piss a lot of people off, but I will explain myself why I think Max Holloway is greater all time than Alexander Volkanovski and Islam Makhachev. In contrast to Volkanovski, we already established earlier that, you know, the 3 Max Holloway wins is what elevates him so highly in the GOAT rankings. If he didn't have the Holloway wins, right, he would be, you know, merely in the top 50s, right? But the fact is, he has those 3 Holloway wins, and unfortunate for him, 2 of those Holloway wins are, you know, sort of controversial, and one of them should have been either way. You know, at worst, a draw. Right? Let's just give Volkanovski the benefit of the doubt, right? Let's just ignore the, you know, Max Holloway win and step it aside for a little bit, right? Let's just include it, but, you know, just move it aside for a little bit. His next best win is Jose Aldo, right? Max Holloway knocked out Jose Aldo twice. You're telling me that his second best win is Jose Aldo, in which Max Holloway knocked him out twice? Beating Jose Aldo by knockout twice is far superior than, you know, beating Max Holloway 3 times, in which 2 of them were kind of, you know, controversial, right? I rank the Jose Aldo, you know, 2 knockout wins way higher than Volkanovski, 3 Max Holloway wins. And yes, I understand that Volkanovski did beat Jose Aldo as well, but guess what? Max Holloway beat the better version of Jose Aldo in a more dominant fashion as well. And he did that twice. Every single person that, Volkanovski beat, Max Holloway beat them as well. Right? If you negate the Chad Mendes win from Volkanovski, every single person that Volkanovski has beaten, well, at least the good ones, Max Holloway has beat them as well. And in most cases, Max Holloway beat them in a more dominant fashion. Max Holloway also has wins that, Volkanovski simply doesn't. Great wins as well. I mean, he got the Gaethje win, which fucking is insane. He also got an Arnold Allen, in which by far Arnold Allen is a far superior win than someone like Chad Mendes, by far, right? People don't realize it, but Arnold Allen is an insane win. Is a fucking insane win. He also got Anthony Pettis, right, as one of his wins as well. Dude, Volkanovski doesn't have an Anthony Pettis. Anthony Pettis is easily a top 50 fighter of all time. Well, that's it. No, he got Frankie Edgar as well. Frankie is a top 50 of all time. He got a Charles Oliveira, arguably a top 20 of all time. Dude, if you want to, nitpick, the smaller wins as well, he got Cub Swanson. If you want to count Cub Swanson as a good win, it is what it is, right? He also got the, Calvin Kattar wins, right? Calvin Kattar, bro, that's like equivalent to a, Bryce Mitchell win, give or take, right? Bro, and he did that in a dominant fashion as well. In a fucking dominant, I get it, right? He didn't finish Calvin Kattar, but he landed fucking over 450 significant strikes in that fight. 450 is significant. That has to be a fucking world record, man. Dude, without being said, Max Holloway is higher on the GOAT list than Volkanovski and Islam, period. And I feel like people are just too biased to realize that. I mean, let me summarize for you again, alright? Let me summarize. So Volkanovski's best win, right? Max Holloway 3 times, right? Okay, fair enough. But two of those Holloway matches were hella controversial. I'll give them 2. I'll give Volkanovski 2, but one of them were extremely controversial, right? It could have been, gone to Max Holloway or Volkanovski or a draw, and everyone would be happy, right? It could have been either way. To give that as a full mark for Volkanovski is just simply unfair. Right, so his next best win is Mendes. Volkanovski beat Aldo as well, Ortega, the Korean Zombie, Rodriguez, and that's it. That's it. It kind of just falls off. He's kind of carried by the Max Holloway wins, right? And let me just remind you, Max Holloway, right? So Volkanovski beat Yair Rodriguez, fair enough. Max Holloway did as well. Okay. Well, Max Holloway beat Korean Zombie as well in a more dominant fashion. He beat Brian Ortega in a more dominant fashion as well. Beat Jose Aldo twice in a far more dominant fashion. Dude, how is this even an argument? I just don't get it. He also beat people that Volkanovski just never fought. Justin Gaethje, that's an all-time win. Arnold Allen, who is a far superior win than, people like Chad Mendes. He beat Anthony Pettis, beat Frankie Edgar, beat Charles Oliveira, and like Bryce Mitchell equivalents such as Calvin Kattar, Cub Swanson, right? In a dominant fashion as well. So how is this even an argument, right? We're talking about greatest of all time, right? Beating someone doesn't necessarily mean you're above them in, on the GOAT list, right? It doesn't, right? Max Holloway has an insane resume. By far one of the most craziest resume of all time. And I feel like people just fail to realize it because they just rate Volkanovski so highly. Right? They rate that 3 Holloway win against, for Volkanovski way too highly. But in reality, we shouldn't even be looking at that. Sure, if it's 3 dominant, if he beat Max Holloway by knockout 3 times, then yeah, then we're talking, right? Yeah, then we're talking, right? If he beat Max Holloway like the same way that he beat Max Holloway for the 3rd fight, then we're talking. But the reality is, one of them were fucking razor close, man. Razor close, in which should have been a draw at best. And even if you award it to, Volkanovski, right, the 2nd fight, even if you award it to Volkanovski, the fact is you can't really give it full marks to Volkanovski. So without even being biased, if you ignore the recency bias, man, if you open up your 3rd eye, you will easily realize why Max Holloway is far more superior than Volkanovski in terms of overall GOAT rankings, right? If we're talking about 145 division, strictly on that, then maybe there's an argument, right? But we're talking about GOAT, overall. So I feel like it's not even an argument, to be fair. So therefore, I have Max Holloway at the 5th place. Oh my god, we're almost finished, dude. We are almost finished. At the 4th place, I got Khabib Nurmagomedov. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of people are gonna hate about this, you know, but you can't deny the man, bro. You can't deny the man, bro. He has the most dominant fights in UFC history, the most 10-8 rounds ever. Right, and you gotta look into those as well, especially, you know, since the fact that he is fighting, you know, great fighters near, you know, the second half of his career. Never really been tested, and, you know, I feel like we can all agree, as much as, you know, some people hate Khabib, we can all agree that if he still continue on fighting, he could have easily become the, you know, the greatest of all time, potentially over, you know, surpassing people like GSP or John Jones, easily. The only issue with Khabib is that, you know, he won his title against Quinta, right? But to be fair, you know, like I said, title wins don't matter, so we can just ignore that, right? But, you know, other than that, right, his best wins are kind of flawed, right? He lacks the quality of wins, but his quality of wins in general are just fucking insane, man. Beating really good fighters in a very dominant fashion, right? And you gotta rate those highly as well. You know, 10-8ing people like, you know, RDA, who is one of the greatest of all time, if I'm being honest, right? Top 100 greatest of all time. Decent fighters like, you know, Michael Johnson, fucking Edson Barbosa, who is a really good fighter as well. Conor McGregor, that is an all-time win in a dominant fashion. Dustin Poirier, all-time win as well in a dominant fashion. Justin Gaethje, all-time win in a dominant fashion. And that's, you know, that's insane, right? Beating all these great fighters in a very dominant fashion. It's not an easy task to do. Matter of fact, it's never been done before, essentially, right? Being this consistent, while being this dominant, man, that puts you up highly, right? And the fact that he has no losses, that is also insane. I mean, Khabib has little to no, like, fucking flaws, right? The only problem with his resume and why I can't rank him any higher is because of the lack of quality of wins. Although his good wins in general are fairly dominant, very dominant actually, one of the most dominant fighter ever. You know, if he stayed around and faced someone like Tony Ferguson, I know they were like scheduled to fight numerous times, right? If he beat someone like Tony Ferguson in dominant fashion, especially that version of Tony Ferguson, you know, and stayed around and maybe beat someone like Charles Oliveira as well, who was on a winning streak, a massive winning streak, then we can possibly talk about Khabib actually being the top 3 greatest of all time. But until then, he kind of just retired too early and just lacks the quality of wins. If he has that Tony Ferguson as well as Charles Oliveira on his resume, then we're talking about, you know, actually putting him a little bit higher. But until then, I have Khabib at rank 4. At number 3, I got Daniel Cormier. I feel like you guys understand where this, you know, this list is going. But anyways, Daniel Cormier at number 3, I feel like he is the second greatest light heavyweight of all time. Looking at his losses, he's only lost to 2 people. Stipe, which he already, you know, has a win over, as well as John Jones. So you're telling me his only losses are from, you know, the heavyweight GOAT, the greatest heavyweight of all time, as well as the greatest of all time. Those are his only 2 losses, man. DC is underrated as fuck. I feel like he deserves a ranking like this, man. Arguably, his only controversial matches are against, you know, Alexander Goffs, right? But that's it. That's it. All his other matches are fairly dominant as well. Little losses, fairly dominant, you know, good wins as well. Great, multiple quality of wins. I mean, let's just highlight his quality of wins. He got a win over Bigfoot Silva, one of the all-times. Josh Barnett, all-time as well. Frank Mir, Dan Henderson, Anthony Rumble Johnson twice. You know, these are all-time wins. Alexander Gustafsson, depending on how you view it, but I do think, you know, Daniel Cormier did win that fight. But even if you don't give the Gus win, he also beat Anderson Silva. I get it, was at 205, but to be fair, Anderson Silva fought at middleweight and 205. So to say that's not a good win is actually insane. You know, there's gonna be people that will say, oh, Anderson Silva was short notice, you know, it was a short notice. But man, those are the same people that would rate, you know, Islam Makhachev against Volkanovski too highly as well, even though that was a short notice match as well. Like, how the fuck does that? Okay, whatever. Let's just ignore the Anderson Silva win. Let's just ignore the Gustafsson win as well. You know, let's just take those 2 wins out. He also got a Stipe Miocic win. That's an all-time win. Lesser known names, he also got, you know, Roy Nelson, Bryce Mitchell, Covens type shit. he also got way more wins as well. Volkan Oezdemir. I'd even name those, right? Derek Lewis. There we go. Jeez, Jeff Monson is legit. Well, especially back in those days, bro. He has a fucking insane resume. Underrated resume, if you ask me. Dion Starling. Like, what the fuck? Like, okay, sure, they're not all-time wins, but, you know, they're still good wins. Like, even if you negate the lesser-known names, like the names I just mentioned, as well as the Gus win and, you know, the Anderson Silva win, he still has a legit argument based on his dominance. As a legit top 10, top 5 greatest of all time, right? So if you include those, man, he's easily the top 3 greatest UFC fighter of all time. With that being said, I have Daniel Cormier at rank 3. And the rest, I feel like the top 2, top 1 is kind of self-explanatory. At number 2, I got GSP. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, I'm not going to repeat myself. I'm sure you guys watch numerous GOAT videos. And, you know, the most consistent answer is, you know, GSP at 2 and John Jones at 1. And I don't know how the Stipe Miocic fight is gonna go, but you know, best believe I do think John Jones will beat Stipe Miocic. And if John Jones does beat Stipe Miocic, especially in a dominant fashion by knockout or something, it's gonna be really difficult to find anybody higher than John Jones. Difficult as fuck. Based on this criteria at least, you know, a lot of people will rank, you know, GSP, Aldo higher than John Jones or something, you know, based on the fact that, or Daniel Cormier. A lot of people put Daniel Cormier higher than John Jones based on the fact that he used steroids. But, you know, that's not a part of my criteria. And therefore, based on my criteria, nobody is passing John Jones. Especially if he has like a knockout loss or a knockout win over Stipe Miocic, bro. Nobody is passing John Jones, at least in the next fucking 10 years, bro. It's gonna be really difficult. So yeah. This is the end of this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys watched the whole thing, made it to the end, man, you guys deserve a hug, man. Holy shit. This took me almost a month of off and on, you know, based on my real life obligations, bro. I can't be focusing on this like 24/7, man. You know, I've been working on this off and on. But yeah, check out my other videos, especially the Merab video. It just explains briefly on my justification on why I have Merab at rank 13th. But yeah, check out my other videos as well. I appreciate, you know, you guys tuning in. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. You might disagree with some of my takes, and that's okay. That's okay, because this is my GOAT list based on my criteria. I understand that different people have different criterias, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong. But anyways, yeah, peace out, bunk bed out. I'm gonna sleep, bro. This is actually really fucking draining. 2.5 hours, that's crazy. Holy shit.